he tired of Karl Marx, and because he felt like Karl Marx wasn't a true socialist, he wasn't a true revolutionary. He would have dinner, with the English socialites and this and that. And so August Willich, who was by birth, he was August von Willich, but when he became a socialist, he dropped the von because no good socialist appreciates titles of nobility. And in German, von is usually, it's a title of nobility, or it's an indicator of nobility. And so anyway, Willich eventually challenges Karl Marx to a duel, and Marx just ignores him and all that. And eventually Willich leaves England and travels to the United States, and he settles in Cincinnati, Ohio. And when the Civil War broke out, because he was a socialist, like many good socialists, he was an avid abolitionist. And when the Civil War broke out, he raised an Ohio regiment, and it became one of the most outstanding commanders, period, on either side. And he eventually rose to the rank of division command, and he was the division commander at Chickamauga, distinguished himself and all that, and ended up surviving the war. And when the war ended, he went back to Cincinnati and became something like a celebrity. He became the favorite son. He was given the key to the city and all that. And when they founded the very first professional baseball team, the Cincinnati baseball team, they named it in honor of the Red, August Willich. They named them the Cincinnati Reds. That's a true story.
Wow, sounds true.
Yeah. So there's a Chickamauga Major League Baseball connection there.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you guys are the Reds team, you said now?
The Reds now. We were the Twins for the last few years, and then before that we were the Dodgers, and we had some great talent come through. Corey Seager came through. Clayton Kershaw did a rehab start there in Chattanooga. Unfortunately, it's one of those teams that's on the chopping block for minor league baseball. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's the oldest continuously operating professional baseball team in minor league, and I just can't imagine Chattanooga without baseball. So hopefully they get that worked out. We're not having baseball this year there, but
I feel like every minor league team is always on the chopping block. They always say that.
Seems like it, man.
Well, and that's the double-edged sword with having a minor league team. I mean, if anyone's good, they're getting called up. So you don't ever really get to have like the same experience. You know, you can be bought in, but you're not going to have like that loyal following like a major league team does.
Yeah. I was telling Will while you walked away there, Gary, that that's one of the draws to wrestling and baseball and rock and roll for Piper is that it seems like the origins of all three are shrouded in kind of a haze, a mystery, almost like a ghost story. Robert Johnson and the foundings of baseball with Rounders or cricket or whoever, and of course wrestling in the traveling Carney land or Carney lore and all that. They're all very similar. It's part of the charm, man. It's very, very romantic.
Love it. Yeah. I'm ready for some baseball.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. We have like a small version of Fenway here. So it has like the Green Monster and all that stuff. It's kind of cool.
What's the Greenville team called now?
Drive.
Okay. And you said they're AA?
Yep.
Yeah. We used to have the Braves. It used to be the Greenville Braves, but
oh man, the Greenville Braves. That was where it was at when I was a kid. We had Glavin came up through there, rehab through there. Avery. I remember like Ron Gant was there rehabbing like all because I think they were in Greenville before Gwinnett. So that was the team that's now in Gwinnett.
What happened was the Braves became one of the few teams that actually buy its affiliates outright rather than just go into developmental agreements. I think there's only two or three. The Dodgers and the Braves and maybe the Yankees own their teams outright. There might be a couple of others, but I'd be interested to know in the chat who you guys are rooting for in terms of baseball.
Yeah, we want to give a shout out while we're getting things rolling here. James Lawrence, Ryan Romano, WWE Front Row, RJ is here, Dr. Red, Tyler, don't trust him. Nobody talk to him and trust him. He's crazy. He just don't want to do it.
I trust him.
He says you can trust him, but that's the first sign to me that you don't.
I believe
the man says you can trust him.
Yeah, trust him. Just trust him.
Oh, man.
We love you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming out. And we're going to get rolling here in a minute. I was just sending out the links for folks. And RJ says they have the Twins AAA affiliate there.
I
Ryan
love the
says-
Twins, man. We had the Double A affiliate until this year. So we saw Miguel Sano, Byron Buxton. Man, who else?
How can you be a Braves fan and love the Twins?
Yeah,
That was like
I'm
some
still-
of the worst, most traumatic
I
experiences
know.
of my youth.
I was like,
I'm a
they were the
Lookouts fan.
villains of
I'm
my
a Lookouts
childhood.
fan, too. I get it, man. Yeah, I carry those scars also. I remember that, but I'm a Chattanooga fan, so for me everything's local. I support all my local teams, and so I support them in the minor league, and when they're playing at the Southern League. But when they go up to the bigs, I reverse course and root on my Bravos.
Oh man.
Ryan Romano is a Braves, Cubs, and a Red Sox fan. RJ,
I can
who
get
lives
down
in
with that.
Buffalo, I think, is a Yankees fan. Much respect. We deeply respect the Yankees. We don't like them, but we respect them. James Lawrence was a Yankees fan. Same thing. We took the girls to see the Yankees and the Mets last April, and again, don't like them, but I respect the world out of them.
I like the Cubs. I get down with the Cubs. I when I lived up in Illinois, like my girlfriend's family especially were like huge Cubs fans. So we would go, especially when the Cubs played the Cards. Like we went to those games.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love
typically-
those very tradition-laden teams like Detroit and Chicago, the White Sox and the Cubs. I mean, I just for the history of it, to me, those. So again, the same reason I like wrestling and rock and roll. It's intertwined in American history, and you just have to venerate it.
I typically in all sports go Atlanta, Boston, and then Chicago. So that's kind of my pecking order. Except for in Major League Soccer, I started off an Atlanta United fan, but since Charlotte announced that they're getting a team in 2021, I've kind of jumped over to that train a little bit because new team, exciting, kind of being part of something from the start. It's appealing.
Yeah.
So,
Wait, what's that in? That Charlotte's getting a
Charlotte,
team?
yeah, MLS, Major League Soccer.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yep,
Oh,
2021.
of course, the biggest Angels fan in the world is JayCal, and I was telling Will before we started that Piper likes the Angels too, just because of the mascot, But we respect the Angels quite. I like Mike Trout a lot, and
Angels in the outfield.
Yeah, man.
Picked up big off-season trades, man, in Anaheim. Big off-season trades. They're going to contend this year.
My favorite basketball player is Horace Grant.
Of course.
Always has been. I love that guy. So the Magic and with the Bulls and everything. Man, I just loved him. It's like
Were you who was it? Karl Malone and Dennis Rodman feuded in the WCW?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when that happened. I just
remember Karl Malone doing the diamond cutter and doing the symbol. He just looked so unnatural. As athletic as he was, it was just like, nope, stick to basketball.
I remember when Dennis Rodman called Lex Luger Lex Luthor. Remember that? He was cutting a promo in the ring. He's like, Lex Luthor. Like, oh man, no, so they didn't brief him.
He didn't care, man.
All right. So I just like shared this out to like every Facebook group I could find that had wrestling in it. But definitely to James William Lawrence's 10 Pounds of Gold National Wrestling Alliance fan club, who is our official, unofficial Facebook group.
Hey, in front row, I'm gonna take you up on that. I'm gonna be up in Charlotte a lot when that team launches next year. So we'll get down, get some good food, hang out, talk about wrestling.
All right. Is everybody feeling good? You ready to get started, I guess?
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
yeah, why not?
Ready for some gravy cake?
Gravy cake.
Just say to sub sandwich, I'm ready for dessert.
Uh-oh.
That's what Gary and I are. We're your dessert.
Damn right. Damn right you are.
2 scoops of beard right here, baby. What's up, you beautiful people? This is Gary Horton. This is the NWA, the podcast celebrating the past, present, future, history, legacy, and tradition of the greatest pro wrestling entity of all time, the National Wrestling Alliance. And I am but one of your humble hosts, Gary Horn. I am also joined today by Mr. Hey, it's Will.Daily.
Gary, you're probably the only humble host out of the three of us. So
That's probably true. And also joined by the good doctor himself, straight from Myrtle Beach, Dirty Myrtle, South Carolina. Still no airbrush t-shirts, but he's here. Doc Stinson is in the house.
Heck yeah. Good evening, everybody. Raise a glass to freedom.
Yep. Raise a glass. And Terry McDermott is in the house. RJ's in the house. JayCal's in the house. Front row, James Lawrence, Dr. Red Tyler, Ryan Romano, and I'm probably leaving somebody out. But thank you guys for being here already in the live chat. And what we're going to do, I'll just say this up front. What we're going to do for this is like the first part of this we'll do also for the audio portion of the show, the podcast portion. And then once we get through that, we'll wrap everything up, but we will stay live with whoever's in the chat and talk about whatever you guys want to. Nothing's off limits because this is the NWA After Dark. So we got no rules. It could get crazy in here. And I found this mini bottle of Crown Royal that I already dumped into this coffee cup right here. Oh, wait, look at this.
Oh, you got it.
Oh, snap.
What is it? Oh, what is that? What is that coffee cup?
Oh,
Gary,
yeah.
tell us where we can find one of those.
Oh, my goodness.
I had
look
one
at
of those.
this. Yeah, I ordered this from the NWApod.com. It is it's
don't
our
say.
site where you can get official hashtag NWA fam merch right there in the shop. And it's all marked down right now to cost. All you got to do is pay for the cost and pay like $5 flat rate shipping, and you can get all the hashtag NWA fam merch your heart desires. It's a lovely mug, very nice size too. It's very big. I don't know if you can see it compared to my head. I have a huge head, and this thing's right there with it. It is.
That's how we
nice.
size it. It's 3/4 of Gary's head.
Right. That's when you look up the official sizes. That's what it says.
I'm gonna change it. I'm gonna
This
change
is
it on the
NWA.
description.
That's our sizing standard. Yeah, it's a quarter head. Give me a quarter head of ice cream. We were referring to Gary's head.
Oh man. I see WWE Front Row's got his NWA fam shirt already, so
Nice.
that's good.
Hey,
I've
send
only
out
got the
some-
coffee
send out some
mug.
pics.
Yeah, we got to post those pics and retweet that stuff.
Heck yeah,
Have it
man.
on good authority that some of the hashtag NWA fan that are actually people we know from in the ring may also have some merch coming their way too. So we're hopefully we'll start seeing this stuff pop up all over. Represent hashtag NWA fam. Guys, it's
Or as us youngsters say, pound sign NWA fan.
yeah, that's right.
That's
As
what all
you
the kids are
youngsters
saying
say.
these days. They're all saying pound sign. That's the newest thing.
Is that what the kids are saying?
Yeah. And they got this new dance too, man. It's called the Dougie or something like that. Watch me Dougie.
Is that what they do?
Before
On
we
the
get
Thank you,
all into that,
That's
I do want to
just-
give a
that's
shout
just
out
coming
to
out.
if you're listening to this and you don't already subscribe to 10 Pounds of Gold National Wrestling Alliance Fan Club, you got to do that on Facebook. Also in the chat right now is our friend Terry McDermott, who runs NWA Unfiltered, which is another NWA Facebook group. I just want to give a shout out to them. You guys got to jump in there. I believe they consider the Alliance Blog their official podcast over there, which we'll accept because we like JayCal. So if it wasn't for that, though, I'd be very disappointed in you. But who better? Really, honestly, he's just a genius. So got to have that guy on there. JayCal, I don't know if you're going to be able to stick around the whole time, but we did get a user question that I think you would actually be the ultimate authority for. But that usually comes after the main part. But anyway, that out of the way. Guys, you feeling okay?
Yeah, I was going to
All
say
right.
if we didn't have a podcast, I mean, we are a podcast, but if we didn't have a podcast, I think JayCal would be the official podcast for us as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would do that. Shout out to NWA Gold, who's also in the chat. If you guys don't follow him on Twitter and Instagram, really, that guy just shows off all the old school belts and stuff like that. It's a cool follow. So you guys should look him up. And the rest of you are all right, too. Jonathan Darwin, it's good to see you back, buddy. All right. So I'm not going to just keep doing shout outs all day, I guess, because that's not exciting for anybody listening. But we were going to start today off with some news. Is that right, Will? You're the news man.
Oh, Emma?
Well, okay. I don't know. Hopefully you guys are joining us and you went to the pre-party today. Oh, Brian Lang's in the chat too. I don't want to leave that guy out and his excellent art. And Dave Scooby. God, I'm sorry. I see all these names and I'm so happy with our community. I just want to say your names. Say my name. Say my name.
That's right. That's
What?
right. That's right, man. I like that. Give me another stanza.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh.
I was going to say, if you did not go to the pre-party today with JayCal, you need to really listen. This was a really good discussion on Eddie Kingston and Nick Aldis and the challenge and what that feud potentially will mean for the NWA and how he just reiterates that regardless of what the outcome will be, that is a win-win for the NWA, for the NWA fan community. So go back and do subscribe, like, and listen to his content, especially today's pre-party talk, man. It was outstanding.
Hey, that's a good point you just brought up there. Shout out Brian Rosa, who's also in the chat. Good to see you, sir. Let's jump right into that. I mean, if we are not an NWA podcast, what are we? Let's talk about the fact that was it Sunday night, like right as we were live, all of this stuff started breaking out. We had already seen the tweet from Eddie Kingston saying that he wanted a shot at the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. And Sunday night, Nick Aldis responded and said, well, he wants a challenge. So let's get this thing together. And Eddie Kingston said, your champ's not a coward. This is good news. I've seen stuff tossed around about All Japan and all of that. I jumped in on the JayCal discussion of it today, but where are you guys landing on this? How you feeling? Have you seen any more that I'm not aware of?
Did you see that Ricky Morton offered his venue up as the potential host venue to get this match in the works?
Yeah, he jumped right in and was like, hey, I got a place. Let's do it.
That's pretty impressive. I have not seen that yet. So this is why I watch this show, so I could get the news and the updates. So, and this is why you got to watch this show. So this is great. So no, that would be awesome to see something like that happen. Who else did I see there recently? Was it Kingston or no? I guess it was Crimson and Jack Stain were at Ricky Morton's school doing some stuff. But yeah, wow, that's cool. So Ricky Morton shot out a tweet. We may be seeing something sooner than later out of these two. That'll be a heck of a match. I hope that somebody starts filming the promos because that's what we need out of those.
I just want the promos, man. Give them to me now.
I don't think this is just guys just like randomly casually tweeting though. I think there's something to this. I think there's some momentum and a groundswell where people who are in a position to make these decisions are starting to sense that, hey, we need some wrestling now. Let's get some wrestling and let's have some title defenses and get the belts back out there in the public eye, whether it means empty arena or whatnot. So I don't think that this is just a flippant exchange on social media. I think that Eddie Kingston and Nick Aldis are very serious about making this happen. So again, I don't have contacts like Gary might have and all that, so I don't know that to be a fact, but it just seems to me that this is legit. This is a real deal.
Bro, you just toss out my name like I've got some kind of sweet contacts, but I didn't even know about the Ricky Morton thing until right now. So I don't know exactly that I'm the ultimate source. I mean, we're a team here. So,
right.
But speaking of title matches and seriousness, I see Brian Rosa in the chat right now saying that Stinson, I think you're going to get the NWA women's title match you talked about last week. What's he referring to there, Stinson? Refresh our memories.
We were talking about, shoot, I have to go back. We were talking about what was the context of that discussion? Mr. Rosa, chime in and remind us of the context of that. They're like, I've got about four Thunder Rosa matches that I'm dying to see right now. So I know we want to see Thunder and Allison Kay hook it up again. Gosh, who were we talking about?
I think we were just fantasy booking Mission Pro, right? And we were talking about having a title match.
We were talking about Mission Pro, but we mentioned someone in particular that came up, and I was like, "Gosh, man, that's." See, now I'm gonna have to go back and look at the show. What was that? That was
sorry to put you on the spot. I just I saw him mention that in the.
No, I know. No,
here,
it's the name's on the tip of my tongue. But there's 3 or 4 that's swirling in my head.
Yeah, I saw a Front Row mentioning that. Yeah, we were just booking Mission Pro. I remember that happening.
I know
RJ's asking if it was Tessa. I can 100% confirm it's not Tessa. We pretty much have officially established that. So
I've publicly stated that I want to see Lindsay Snow and Thunder Rosa lock it up. Of course, I'd love to any time that Thunder Rosa and Allison Kay lock up. That's a main event, man. I'd love to see like Penelope Ford and Thunder Rosa go like they have. They've got a little bit of a history, but Jazz for sure. Oh, Jazz and Thunder Rosa is the Super Bowl, man. That'd be amazing.
They're both out in Texas too, so that feels like that could happen.
Gosh, I have to remember. There's just so many. There's 4 or 5 that I'm really dying to see. I'm really keen on seeing Lindsay Snow and Thunder Rosa lock up, man. I'd love to see that. I think they both have similar kind of vibes. They got real edgy looks about them.
I think it'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of matches we'd love to see with Thunder Rosa. JayCal dropping Heather Monroe's name in there. That would be awesome. We just honestly, like, we're just excited to see some of our people back, man. I miss seeing Thunder Rosa fight. I miss seeing Nick Aldis battle. I just miss that. I went on a rampage the other day on the Insta stories, just posting photos I had, just talking about the people that I think we all miss. But yeah, I had some like good close-up footage of Thunder Rosa taking an Allison Kay superplex, and that was fun to just revisit. But I would take that match again in a heartbeat just to see something happen. I love these guys, and
I'd love to see the title being defended in Mission Pro as well. If they can work that out,
100%.
That would be amazing. And again, that just speaks to what we believe about the prerogatives of the NWA title, that it is the World's Championship. And so, these other organizations and entities are credible, but the one that reigns supreme is the NWA. I've always felt like that. Like I don't care if you're WWE or AEW or whatever. The World's Championship, the legitimate, real, lineal, true World's Championship, is either the 10 pounds of gold or the Burke, and that's it. Everything else is subordinate to it. So, and honestly, y'all can chime in, and JayCal probably has talked to people who know this, and Brian Rose I'm sure does, and WWE Front Row. But I think that probably most wrestlers venerate the NWA title in that way too. I mean, we just saw you had that beautiful tweet comparing the Sting Ric Flair match and the Cody Aldis match, and Cody is very adamant that this was it. This was every other title paled compared to this one. And I think most workers who understand their history probably feel that way too. I don't think I'm being presumptuous there.
No, I don't think so. And go ahead, Will. I'm sorry.
No, I agree with that. And I mean, not just the history, but I think even in the industry, there is a respect, whether it's outspoken or not, for the modern iteration, this Billy Corgan iteration of the NWA, because they see a reflection of that same prestige that it had when they were growing up. And it's kind of, put it back in the spotlight a little bit, especially with All In, like we talked about last week when we were covering that feud. Just it brought it to such a large audience that I do. I mean, I think between Nick and Cody and that feud, it put it back in a position of authority and respect. Not that not that it was ever out, but in terms of audience and people thinking about it and talking about it, it definitely took a big step forward with that feud.
I felt really good today because I not to toot my own horn, but toot. Cody did retweet that tweet, which I just made like a quick little video to throw up that was like, if you missed it, it was Great American Bash 90, the main event there, the ending of that, combined with the ending of the Cody and Aldis first matchup at All In. And just to show the comparison between the two matches, just that when that 3 count hit, the arms go up and that sort of thing. I did it kind of as an homage just because I happen to know that Mr. Lagana during that time, that was something he was referencing in his mind, like as far as what it meant in that event and that sort of thing. And so I was just trying to make that comparison there, since we're going to be talking about Great American Bash here in just a bit. But anyway, Cody did retweet that and had a nice little paragraph about it. And that actually gave me some, I don't know, just a spark of hope, like a spark of joy, just that Cody was acknowledging it again, because you don't get to see him do that very much given his current project. So it was just nice to see him just like Front Row saying in the chat, just quote tweeting that and adding context. It's very cool to see him discuss it. But to you guys' point, I think JayCal hit the nail on the head. He points out in the chat that Triple H has the 10 pounds of gold hanging up in his office. So enough said. So yep. There you go.
In the offices of the WWE, the 10 pounds of gold has the place of respect and privilege and honor. So that should say everything. It is the world's title.
Yeah. Front Row saying that LaGreca was talking about it on today's show, talking about the 10 pounds of gold and how it's a lot of people's favorite title. And so that's very cool. So guys, you hear me mention JayCal a lot. I was going into it. I don't remember if I fully got it out there, but if you don't already, you want to follow the Alliance blog. You want to follow First to Third on Twitter. That's JayCal. He is an excellent source of wisdom regarding the National Wrestling Alliance, and he does a show on Tuesdays at 5, a pre-party. Right now, we're the bread on an empty sandwich because there's no NWA content right there. But you get JayCal earlier on in the evening, and you get us in the late night portion. But yeah, that's you definitely got to check out his show. He's just got a lot of infinite wisdom regarding National Wrestling Alliance that rivals our own Doctor of Style, Robert Stinson here. But speaking of Cody, the next thing I had listed, like as far as the news here, was that he has issued, obviously the open challenge for the TNT title on AEW, and we've seen responses now from Zicky Dice, Eli Drake, lots of people honestly chiming in. I mean, you guys have probably seen a lot of other people, but I just thought those were interesting. We're seeing like NWA names, and I've seen, I don't remember if I've seen Eddie Kingston directly mention it, but a lot of people have been throwing him in the mix. Like I've seen in the replies, people are just like, what about Eddie Kingston? I know our own Wrestling with the MMA in the chat was one of them.
Him and Stu Bennett. Stu Bennett I was looking at the thread earlier today, and a lot of people were saying Stu Bennett. So, I think a lot of people want to see him and Cody go at it. So I just thought it was interesting. I mean, there was a lot of NWA names represented within there, and it was kind of cool to see. Who knows if any of that will materialize or not, or what conversations are going on business wise about potentially some of those guys popping on. I know tonight he was there last week, but Brian Pillman Jr. Was scheduled to be on Dark tonight. I didn't get to watch it. I don't know if anybody watched it that wants to fill us in on how that was, but I think AEW is making it clear they're open to one-off appearances and people from other promotions. Brian Pillman's under contract with MLW, so they didn't really shy away from that. So who knows? I mean, I think it's a real possibility, and they can make it work, man. I'd love to see Zicky and Eli and some guys like that pop in over at AEW for a one-off, especially with Cody. I mean, working with Cody would be phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think we all have a sense that that Cody Aldis 3 is it's got to be inevitable. If there's any justice in the world, we have to see the rubber match. So, you know,
it would be interesting to see that happen. So the other bit of news that comes out of the WWE that I saw listed is where are we at on the brand new debuted United States Championship? I'm gonna shock the world right now, and I'm just gonna go out on a limb and just throw it out there. Didn't hate it, kind of dug it, honestly. Think it looks kind of cool.
Well, that's a bold take, Gary. I haven't formulated a solid opinion. I know I hated the previous one, and a lot of people liked it. It's been around for a while, so I know there's some connections there with different eras of WWE for those of us who've been wrestling fans for a lot of years. When I think of US titles, for me, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think of the WCW US title, the one that Rick Rude and Sting and people like that held for so long. That's the one that comes. If you tell me to picture the US title, that's the one I picture. And in terms of the new title, I mean, the modern aspect of it. I like the shape of it. I definitely think there's some similarities. I think we've pointed out between that and the NWA tag titles with the eagle and things like that. So there's a little bit of similarity there, but I don't know. I think I need to see a few people carry it before I can formulate an opinion, because I need to see what it looks like. The just looking at the belt by itself doesn't really put it in context enough for me to say if I like it. I need to see it on a guy's shoulder, around his waist, before I can form a solid opinion.
I kind of liked it, man. I'm a patriotic guy, and I love seeing the stars and stripes on there. I also like that there was sort of a vintage throwback with the eagle there at the bottom. So I guess I kind of go on Gary's. I didn't hate it, man. It's not my favorite. I think for me, the U.S. title in my mind is always that nickel one that Magnum TA wore before they brought the gold one in, that Nikita eventually won and Lex Luger made famous. That for me is the definitive U.S. title, but I don't hate this one, man. I think it's cool. It's I love that big eagle on the bottom. I think it's kind of striking. If there was anything I didn't like about it, it would be the shape of it. The sort of what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 size there. It's a very boxy, very Volvo looking. But as far as the face of it, I thought it was kind of attractive, man, actually. Prominent red, white, and blue. I love those stripes at the bottom behind the eagle. How it says champion in big blue letters. I mean, I think it's kind of a neat looking design. So we'll see.
What about since we're talking about WWE, and I see you in the chat. I'm not gonna just ignore you. Some people like James Lawrence back with the TNT title said nobody should be challenging from the NWA for a mid-card title. So we want to acknowledge that take too. He thinks the NWA is better than the TNT title all day long. And but yeah, I mean, Front Row's mentioning NWA talent showing up representing on AEW is a big opportunity, especially if AEW acknowledges their NWA status, which they might based on Ricky Stark's debut. That's a good take. They definitely mention the NWA and the TV title in Ricky Stark's in his debut. WWE wise, I just had to talk about this for a second because Stinson probably didn't see this since he doesn't pay attention, but I have to know.
My girl just got out of the pool, so she's dripping wet here. Little cameo, a Petra and a Piper cameo. There, Mama was down there with him in the pool. So,
what's up? There's the star of this is the NWA YouTube channel, Piper of Piper's Notes.
Oh,
there she is, a celebrity.
Right. Go to Mama. Go to Mama, baby.
Don't mess with the computer.
All right. Sorry about that, guys.
No, you're fine. I just it's actually interesting because this is a good topic for people with kids. One of the matches on WWE right now being advertised, it was announced on Monday night after a win by Kevin Owens and Rey Mysterio, that Rey Mysterio gets to pick the what's the word I'm looking for? The thing for their match. I can't think of the word for some reason, but stipulation. My God, I could not think of that word for some reason. Thank you. So he gets to pick the stipulation. And since Seth has attacked his eye previously, Rey Mysterio has chosen an eye for an eye match in the WWE. And so somebody is going to lose an eye, I guess. What is this? What is happening?
It's a bunch of tomfoolery is what it is. Ridiculous. That's what I hate about wrestling, man.
Who?
Yep.
I don't know him.
Oh, it's tomfoolery, love. It's a bunch of boulder dashery. Come on, guys. This is pro wrestling. It's a spectator sport. We're not putting eyeballs on the line. Stop. Knock it off. Quit insulting our intelligence. This is what I think about it.
Well, I mean, this is not the first time we've seen this in the last 365 days, right? I mean, didn't
you're gonna put a man's eye out? You do it with like the Road Warriors did with a spike. No stipulation. You jump him and put his eye out.
Well, that's what happened. That's what happened in AEW. They had that whole storyline with Chris Jericho and John Moxley, and they had an eye for an eye match, and it was, yeah. So I mean, it feels like a clear ripoff, and I think Jericho even tweeted out the picture from that match, and said like, "Oh, this sounds familiar." So I don't know. It does feel like the WWE is being a little reactive, and I don't fault them for that. It's business. But, Fyter Fest was announced, and then they're like, well, we're going to do the Great American Bash. Same 2-week period. And it's just, I don't know. It feels, it's not surprising. And again, I get it from a business standpoint, but, eye for an eye match, I don't know. It doesn't do anything for me.
I hated it when AEW did it. I hate it now. I'm like, come on, WWE. You got the talent, man. NXT is loaded with talent. They're loaded with talent. Give us some prize fights, man. Just it. If you want a winning formula, here it is. You get it right here. Here with a free slice of gravy cake. Just do some performance sport. That's it. Just have some prize fights. That's all you got to do. Put your talented guys in here, cut promos, and have some matches. Don't throw an eye for an eye stipulation. That is ridiculous.
Well, Front Row's in the chat talking about lose an eye, lose the match. It's simple. Well, I'd say like in any match, if you lose an eye, it's well, you know what? No, tonight in the Great American Bash, we're going to talk about the debut of a dude who was debuting directly after that very thing happening. So that
I was about
immediately.
I was about to say, but that was a legit. Like, it wasn't an eye for an eye match. These dudes were just beating the hell out of each other, and his eye popped out. So.
Well, my point was going to be is like, I think any match is over when somebody loses an eye, but that's obviously right away he disproves it.
That's in the official rules somewhere. You lose an eye or a kidney or one of those other major organs, you lose.
Yeah, but Will brings up an excellent point about the WWE just like ripping off AEW a lot, but they also are so scummy about it. But yeah, good show there, Will. If we're going to find out any official information, we go to the Pro Wrestling FAQ book.
Yeah.
By Brian Solomon. You guys.
That's what I was doing. I was looking. I didn't know if there was a section in here about losing an eye. If there was like an official. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Just and Solomon, well, PWI plug. I think Thunder Rosa is being featured in the upcoming issue, which will be the PWI 500 issue. So looking forward to Nick Aldis finally reaching #1. He should be at the pinnacle. I expect him to be. And I think there's a Thunder Rosa article in there, if I'm not mistaken, unless I'm getting my issues confused.
Well, Rob, I don't even know if you meant to do it, but that is a perfect segue into the next news topic that I wanted to bring up. So you're brilliant. PWI announced this morning, they put out a series of tweets, and I thought this was interesting and worth mentioning. They're saying, I'm just going to read them here. Effective this year, the PWI 500 will include wrestlers who, regardless of gender, best fit our usual criteria: win-loss record, technical ability, influence on the sport, success against the highest grade of competition, success against the most diverse competition and activity. It says this year's PWI 500 will include wrestlers who excelled against opponents of any gender or who held traditionally male or gender neutral championships. For the first time, multiple women will be included on the list. Frankly, this is long overdue. Women who compete exclusively or almost exclusively in women's divisions or promotions won't be ranked in this year's 500. However, they will be eligible for the women's 100 list. We acknowledge this is an imperfect system, but it seems to us the most equitable approach for now. So it's an interesting change. I'm not sure I'm not sure I quite understand why they're not just going all in on this thing. That's my only curious. Like, that's the thing I'm most curious about.
What is you guys' understanding of when they say women who compete exclusively or almost exclusively in women's divisions / promotions? I mean, so only intergender women competitors would be, so basically Tessa Blanchard is what they're saying.
Yeah, it's a cop out.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the first half of that statement because I agree. I think that you can look at a pound for pound athlete, and that pound for pound greatest athlete might be a woman. That's okay. I have no problem with that. But go all in, like Gary's saying. Don't freaking hedge it, man. Don't tippy toe around it because you're afraid of like offending somebody. Just go all in, man. I mean, Tessa Blanchard is one of the best all pound for pound athletes. She's not my favorite. I don't think she's better than Thunder Rosa, but Thunder Rosa should be in that top 10, top 15 list.
Absolutely.
You know, pound for pound, she's
son,
one of the best.
That's who I'm thinking of. So yeah, like Thunder Rosa and Allison Kay, I'd easily see them in the top 500 if you could include, and that's the ultimate vote there. So I don't see why we're not just going all the way in. So I'd be interested to ask them that, like why they're not doing. But then another name that I saw come up where they gave a little more clarification on that is people kept asking about Asuka as well. And they said, well, at this time, Asuka would be included in the top 100 or the women's 100, but not in the PWI 500 right yet. So I don't really. I mean, you're right though. I think it's Tessa. Tessa's a huge one. She won the world's heavyweight championship in TNA. So I guess that's how they're figuring they not have to start there or something. I don't know. But they say multiple women are going to be in it already. So I don't know who those are or how. Yeah, I don't know. But none of the major companies.
They wanted it to be bold, and then they drew it back. They like completely gutted the boldness of it. You know,
well, either that or it sounded like
it's
they needed an excuse to be able to put Tessa or some other people, and they found a loophole or something. But I'm with you guys. Like, it makes total sense to me for that top 500 to be anyone. Like, I don't like. It doesn't matter what division or promotion or gender or whatever. Like, they should be, if they're considering themselves an authority on this stuff, which they are, then they should be able to objectively look at, you know, all competitors in professional wrestling and make a top 500 list. Like, that's the way I look at it. This seems like too many stipulations. You know, when there's matches that have these like weird stipulations, that's what it feels like to me. And it's kind of convoluted at this point. And I don't know how effective or how, I don't know if they think they're making like this big impactful change or anything, but with that last little bit, I think they undid whatever progress they thought they're making.
I honestly, that's exactly how I felt too. Like, I was like, why'd you throw that last part in there? And I'll be honest with you too. I'll check my privilege because I had not even thought about this before. Like, until this tweet, I don't think it had clicked with me that women weren't included in the PWI 500. That just feels like it should be a thing. And I just never, I don't know. I haven't looked at it in a little bit. So Rob would probably know better than I, but I just, I don't know. I guess I just kind of assumed they were considered or something. I don't know. But women's wrestling has come a long way since this thing started. And, you know, who was I hearing the other day? Dave Meltzer on The Observer had April Hunter on the other day, like just doing a little quick interview with her, talking about some of her experience in wrestling. A lot of it obviously revolved around some of the recent stuff, but she talked about like she always gets bummed out because she went through a lot of crap doing, you know, with like bra and panty matches and that sort of thing. But like she was trained, like she was ready to go. But even in the 90s, early 2000s, she thought there were a lot of women that, you know, she's happy that the women that get credit for being wrestlers like they are now are getting it, but they were ready to go too. Like they wanted to, but they were just never even given that opportunity. Like they just were looked at that way. So anyway,
let me ask you this, Rob, maybe you can answer this. If you've been following the PWI, I have not been an avid PWI reader or keeping up with it. Do they have tag teams on that list, or is it just strictly historically it's just been single competitors, or they do have tag teams?
Singles competitors.
Okay.
And it has been the PWI 500, and there's been a lot of controversy. And I don't know, like people have said things like, "Yo, it's really only the first 100 that matter. After that, people purchase a slot." I don't know if that's true or not, but that's been said before. I doubt that that's true. I think that the researchers on the PWI staff probably do their homework and try to get a large representation. But it's been said, and then they've done the women's 100, and that's no shade on women. It's just that that's a smaller sorority or fraternity of athletes. But no, they've not done unless I don't know that they've done a tag team. Maybe JayCal or Mr. Rosa will know about that. But I think it's always been singles guys. Because I remember seeing
both
like
of those
beautiful Bobby and Stan Lane would be in there as individual competitors, not as components of a tag team.
Well, you got both those guys you just mentioned, Brian Rosa and JayCal, for anybody who can't see in the chat, are both saying that PWI rankings are a work. So they both have a stark opinion on those things. So,
and you guys, maybe so. I just, I respect Brian Solomon a lot too, and just know what he's told us about that. So, but it's probably something to it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't think that takes away from Brian or anything we've learned from Brian so far. Like, I don't think he necessarily went into super detail about it, but he's a contributor. I mean, he doesn't run the thing. So, he tries to do his part in researching the articles he writes and stuff like that. Which, by the way, did you guys hear that interview he put out that I linked to it on Twitter, but this is the NWA where he had the manager, like the OG manager, and his name just slipped my mind. Gosh.
Yeah. It was. See, now that you called us out, now
I got to look it up because people need to go check this out. Where is it? Sorry, this is the exciting part of the podcast. I'm going to look this up, and we're going back.
Man, Myrtle Beach has like the worst internet in the world.
Bobby Davis is his name.
Davis. That's it.
Yeah. He's considered the like OG wrestling manager. Like, he was like 16 or something when he started doing this. So he was like training to be a wrestler and stuff, but his size or something like I don't know. The guy managed everybody, but he managed like Buddy Rogers and Bob Orton Sr., the Fargos, Gorilla Monsoon, and like he was in the mix with like Vince Sr. and Toots Mont and stuff like that. And then just one day, just like walked away. That he was just done. And he was like opening Wendy's franchises or something, I think, from the interview, which I saw. But anyway, Brian Solomon tracked this guy down and like had to convince him for a while to get on there and sit down for an interview. But it's really cool, man. It's cool to hear this guy talk. All right. So did you guys have any other news items you wanted to hit on before we move on into today's main event topic?
I don't think so, man. I think that about covers it.
All right. Well, then before we move into the Great American Bash 1990, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's listening so far. If you haven't done it already, hit like on the video, hit subscribe. It helps us out and helps us get in front of more people. Also, if you're listening to this, you could just make a Google account and go to YouTube and just subscribe. That'd be cool too. Let's see here. Sorry, I just got sidetracked by Brian Rose saying the top 100 females are actually done by just one dude who basically does not watch anything but WWE and Shimmer. So there you go.
Well, hopefully they can improve that. I know in the past they've done. There's been a lot of just it's not been a lot of shoot stuff in there, and they've tried to, during Stu's last few years of management, they tried to make it into a real news publication. And I know that it's got some ways to go. It's definitely not La Greca or Meltzer or JayCal or anything like that. But I know when we talked with Nick Aldis, he was pleased that he had been given that he had been ranked in the top 10 at one point. I think in the last one or two. Maybe not I'm thinking about the top 10 rankings, but I think one year he'd been given the PWI Most Improved Wrestler Award or something like that. I can't remember which one he had, but he seemed to value the acknowledgement, I guess. But certainly, wrestling is a big world, and it's hard to get a good perspective on the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of indie promotions out there unless you have researchers, which they obviously don't have. So at some point, it's going to come down to a couple of knowledgeable guys, or maybe even one, who bases that ranking off of the stuff that they watch, which is not the stuff that we watch. So, I think we've even talked at length that I think we were quite displeased with some of the last rankings that they came out. That how in the world do you have someone like a Jake Hager ranked above a Nick Aldis, for instance, in a top 10 ranking when the last time they faced, Aldis beat him, and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's definitely some work and some propaganda and some selling going on in there. But if you look at to me, I guess when you look at the PWI 500, if you make it, if historically, if you're a guy or a female, if you're making it in the top 40 or so, and if you're a guy and the top 10 or 15 as a female, that means that you're doing something good. You're making something of a statement. So, but it needs reform for sure.
Yeah. Shout out to Curtis Butler for stopping by in the chat room, asking about Gabe Sapolsky. Somebody in the chat can probably help this guy out more than I can, but I feel like the last thing I saw about Gabe Sapolsky is he is headed to NXT, to become a trainer there or something like that. So that may not be completely accurate, but that's the last time. Anyway, just thought I'd mention that. But all right, so we're going to jump into the Great American Bash 1990. If you've been listening to us and you've been hanging out with us, you'll know already that this is technically part 2 of our Great American Bash discussion. We discussed the whole build to the actual event last Sunday, I think. Not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before. And we've shown it on our cast watch parties a couple of times now. We've shown the Great American Bash pay-per-view. I've seen this pay-per-view more than any other pay-per-view over the past week. I think I've been watching it and rewatching things from it. So I feel like I know this one pretty well now. But just the quick notes about it. It was set in Baltimore, Maryland. And I think it had a total, it was just under 10,000 fans that were there at the thing. It took place on July 7th, 1990, Baltimore Arena. And it was a co-production with WCW and NWA. It was under the NWA banner, but it was like the last Great American Bash under the NWA banner. This is the right before everything kind of fell apart between the two promotions. Last week, if you followed along, the big thing that we're going into here is that this leads to the huge main event between Ric Flair and Sting. And Sting had been tapped earlier on. I'm not going to recap, obviously, everything that we kind of discussed, but Sting had been talked about for about a year that he was going to be the man. But unfortunately, coming off a challenge to Ric Flair at Clash of the Champions, where they went to a time limit draw, Sting also had a little stint with the Four Horsemen and had that big moment at Starrcade where he, won the tournament, right? And that was Starrcade, wasn't it? Did I just mess that up? I don't know why I'm questioning myself.
Starrcade 89 Future Shot. He wins it and wins the title shot.
Exactly. And so the Horsemen kind of wanted to drop it, but he won't let it go, so kind of drop from the Four Horsemen. But somewhere along the way there, Sting actually injures his knee pretty badly, and things get put on hold. Lex Luger gets thrown in place of Sting, and has a I thought a pretty good match with Ric Flair at was that Wrestle War, I think, and he was originally supposed to go over on Ric Flair in that matchup, but Ric Flair actually refused to drop the title to Lex Luger, saying that had been promised to Sting, and they took that stuff very seriously in those days, and he would not drop it to Lex Luger. So Ric Flair held on to the belt until it was time, and that time was going to be the Great American Bash in July of 1990. So this event was basically, it was set in Baltimore, which was, I tried to find out some history of this, and I looked back on some podcasts and that sort of thing with like JR and Jim Cornette and guys like that talking about it a little bit. Baltimore had some history. JR said that like it was a big town, like one of the bigger towns outside of New York that was considered like not quite all WWE, but they thought they could draw a big town. It was like a town where like Bruno Sammartino had dropped the title to superstar Billy Graham there. So it had like some legacy because of that. And so Baltimore was typically on fire, and they made like six figures at the gate at this show. Their promoter, Gary Juster, lived there, and JR talks about him a lot and says he promoted this thing completely old school style, like just footwork, and had a bunch of contacts in the area. So they packed this thing about as full as they could pack it with people. And so this is back in a time where there weren't many pay-per-views. I think there was only 5 for NWA/WCW during that year. This is coming right off of the last one would have been in May, which was Capital Combat, which was a bigger deal because RoboCop made an appearance, and he's a celebrity. So weren't getting many celebrities back then, and it's often considered. I mean, I've seen it on lists as far as like when you try to look up best NWA pay-per-views of all time, and it gets listed along there. And as JayCal is pointing out in the chat, Baltimore is also part of the Mid-Atlantic scene, so that's also why it's got its roots in the NWA as well. So other interesting things I came across like during this time, and you guys jump in whenever. I'm sorry, I'm just rambling here. But around the fall of 89 through February of 90, Dusty Rhodes had booking rights before, and then Flair picked them up. And so they actually considered this like one of the best wrestling periods or something, I guess, from that time. Like Flair put on like booked great matches. That was the thing. But you were starting to see a little bit of a decline during that time. And somewhere along the way, as Jim Herd was in power and that sort of thing, you'd begin to see the first in the history of Ric Flair and Jim Herd, where they don't get along very well. Ric Flair was stripped of the book and had tried to leave during that time. And they went back to like a committee of booking until they decided to bring in mid-May, they brought in Ole Anderson as the booker for WCW. Now, when it comes to Ole Anderson, I got a lot of my information there from Jim Ross talking about that. One of the things that Ole was good at was great product knowledge. He was good at developing villains, but he had no people skills. And the inmates were running the asylum during this time, and he just didn't care. So a lot of the matches, I didn't realize this as much as I love this pay-per-view, and I've seen it so many times now, but one of the big criticisms of this pay-per-view is that it's didn't have a lot of steam as far as storyline goes. Like Flair and Sting was the match. Like that was the big one that had the big fight feel that we talk about all the time and that sort of thing. The other matches were kind of just there. They were thrown together. There were exciting matches, don't get me wrong. And arguably one of the best matches, is not even the main event, but there wasn't as much storyline build to these things. Right. They talked about this being go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, you see some gems in there and some really curiosity pieces. Like we talked about the Tommy Rich Harley Race match, which is like for fans of history like JayCal or somebody like that, man, that's going to be really interesting just from a historical standpoint, given their history and everything. And then you have like Tom Zank wrestles in that, and you have the Iron Sheik makes a presence in this, but none of these really have a contemporary context in 1990. They're just kind of it's sort of odd, you know, or
Yeah, I mean,
or at best the story writing was very, 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 very thin.
Yeah, JR talks about it a lot that he tried to offer ideas and suggestions. Ole was kind of resistant to a lot of ideas that other people gave him and that sort of thing. And he this was where JR said he was like really learning that if you didn't make it, like to some people, if they didn't create it, then they weren't interested in it. And then he also said Ole seemed to have a fear of change and doing anything new, trying anything. So he didn't seem to talk so much. I mean, it sounds like he buried Ole, and I don't think he was trying to bury him necessarily, but he just said that Ole just kind of had this like attitude of like, if Jim Hurd even suggested anything, he's like, I don't care or whatever. I'll just write it down. That's fine. We'll just do that. And like, there was no like extra thought put into anything that was done. I think I saw in one thing that like, and prior to this, like in events leading up to this, you know, JYD had been booked a lot. Junkyard Dog was like a top baby face or in a good baby face position, but then was kind of dealing with his own issues with substances and that sort of thing. And then would just like no show or like book himself on an indie promotion and be like, actually, these guys are going to pay me more, so I'm not showing up to the WCW thing. And then Ole would be like, all right, whatever. And then he'd like try to get Luger, and Luger would be like, nah, my kid's got a baseball game, so I'm going to that. And so like they'd have trouble like filling in a main event and stuff. And I think I saw like Jim Cornette dealing with some frustration. And I think I actually tried to leave during this time too, because it was just like constantly up in the air, like what was even going on, you know, like during like their regular run of shows, like leading up to this event. So it sounds, for anybody who thinks, I guess, that things were just like this in the late 90s or early 2000s with WCW, it sounds like this was kind of the case like early on, just like so many bosses and that sort of thing. In fact, the biggest one was Flair, who it was very well known in WCW at the time, was unhappy and was pretty much ready to get out. So there was I look back in like some Observer stuff from Meltzer and in Wade Keller's PW Torch, and both guys talk a lot about the expectation was that if Flair was going to drop the title at Great American Bash, his contract was up at the end of July and he would be gone and he would be in the WWF. Like he was planning on heading there. So that was the theory for everyone during the time, at least on the inside. Another person who had just quit right around that time was Cactus Jack. Cactus Jack had been booked in a lot of stuff, and he just felt like he was going to be booked poorly, and had the conversation with Jim Ross, and he dropped out. All of his planned angles and that sort of thing actually ended up going to Elegante. And so this was a guy that was a former basketball player, like was getting cut by the Atlanta Hawks because he wasn't so good at that. And he was a guy they met at like CNN Center, and they wanted to use him because he's huge, and they wanted to make their own Andre the Giant, but without any thought of, you know, let's actually give this guy time to develop into a talent and that sort of thing. So this is like kind of some of his first big appearances. JR mentions a lot of frustration with the Flair stuff, because what Flair hated the most was that, like, literally the week before this event, he was invited to the White House to sit at the head table with George Bush Sr. And Jim Hurd didn't want to use any of that footage or any of that acknowledgement or any of that stuff. It's like South Carolina had a Ric Flair Day like announced, and WCW refused to acknowledge it. And it was just like, he was just like, this is like, what am I even doing here? And he had pretty much decided that he was going to get the most attention from the WWE probably, or WWF at the time. I feel like I'm talking a lot. Are you guys cool?
Yeah. No, it's a good. I'll think of something and then you'll say it. So now you're doing well, man. This is a good narrative.
I was gonna just add too for context. I mean, I feel like I don't know for sure, but I feel like at this time period in 1990, the WCW WWF rivalry was really taking flight. And I think even the fact that they were in Baltimore, historically at that time, Baltimore was about as far south as WWF would go. And so I feel like part of the reason they were even in Baltimore was for that competitive aspect, being in a market where WWF had been, as opposed to going somewhere, like a Greensboro or something like that, where they're more familiar and it's more like solid NWA territory. And all the Ric Flair rumors about him, people were buzzing about finally getting to see him and Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania that next year and things like that. There was a lot of buzz about that. And, I feel like a lot of that led to some of this rushed booking. And even with El Gigante, that was part of it too. I mean, they rushed him to the ring and you could see in this pay-per-view, like he doesn't even do anything. He just kind of stands there because he wasn't ready to do anything. But that was just another indicator of the fact that, they were wanting to do whatever it took to be competitive with the WWF. And that kind of was to their detriment at this point. And, people didn't like Ole Anderson as the booker or Jim Herd. And, it kind of, was the beginning of a little bit of unraveling with WCW. Obviously, as we mentioned earlier, the WCW NWA relationship fizzled not long after this. But I think that's an important piece of context when we look at this pay-per-view. And I didn't know that when I first watched Great American Bash recently over the past couple of weeks. And then when I went back and learned a lot of this stuff kind of became a little more clear to me. And I could start to see these little nuances and little things where I'm kind of like, oh yeah, that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's interesting when you when you start to get some of that context and you look back at it, because I just looked at this as like a pretty fun show. Just obviously I wouldn't have been deep into the backstage goings on during that time, but yeah, I found like from the PW Torch back July 5th of 90. Wade Keller's talking about how like the talk of Ric Flair leaving is the talk of wrestling right now. It's pretty positive he was going to leave. Ole getting hired on kind of slowed it because he's an ally of Ric Flair, but now it's just getting heavier and heavier. The relationship with Jim Herd is no good and that sort of thing. And I mean, Herd's going to be the guy that even later on when Ric Flair does stick around, like gets him to cut his hair and wants him to change his name to like Spartacus or something. So he catches up with the times or something ridiculous like Ric Flair needs to do that. But anyway, so yeah, you've already seen the fallout. I think the Steiners were another group that was rumored at the time. And so yeah, just problems all around from these guys. The big thing that seemed to be implicated here was not just Jim Herd, but just that there was a lot of drama and uncertainty in the back all around. And a lot, you never knew who the bosses were. And the vision is that like in the WWF, it's Vince McMahon and you know who you're dealing with at all times. You always know who the boss is and you know what you're getting paid. And there's no discussion about that. It's like, hey, we're giving you this much money and that's what it is. And so it was just easier. And, most accounts I could get of Ric Flair were that he is not a good politics guy. Like he never has been. He doesn't like that stuff. He just likes to party, likes to drink, and he likes ladies. And that's all he wants to think about. He wants to go wrestle when it's time for him to wrestle. And otherwise he wants to drink and have a good time. And so he didn't like the drama pretty much.
Yeah. And say what you want about like Vince McMahon, but at least Vince McMahon is a wrestling guy. Jim Herd, was not even a wrestling guy. I mean, he was I guess he was a regional manager or a district manager of Godfather's Pizza or Domino's Pizza or something like that. Had no background, and you can't just put someone in there just because they've got some business savvy into wrestling and think suddenly this guy knows what he's doing with talent and I mean, wrestling is a performance sport. You have to have people that know the sport to get in there and pull strings and make decisions. And Jim Hurt obviously wasn't that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I see JayCal in the chat mentioning another thing, saying that Tully Blanchard should have been a much bigger deal. Tully Blanchard was another big guy in this whole thing. Like, obviously, during this time that Tully and Arn had gone to the WWF and had wrestled for a bit there with the Brain Busters. But no, I didn't research the complete details, but it sounded like there was a drug test issue with Tully, and that caused the cut from, or the non-renewal of those guys in WWF. But Arn was brought back in. I think Arn was brought back in with a little bit of a pay cut, and he took sort of a cut there. But Tully said that the amount that he was offered was insulting, and he just wouldn't do it. Now, there was speculation on if he would have played ball for a little bit, if that number would have just gone back up, and they were just testing the waters. But obviously, the Four Horsemen were going to try to come back around. They would have rather had Tully during that time to have the team be Tully and Arn with Flair and Wyndham, and then managed by Ole. But this is where you get to the point where the Four Horsemen kind of seemed to start to be a little less than from all accounts I saw. Just that, because of the deal not working out with Tully, they brought in Sid. And so, it just never felt quite the same for them. And I guess you can sort of see that in this one, since they don't have as huge of a role. They're there. I mean, obviously, but it just wasn't quite the same as people were used to. The only other thing I want to mention going into it is, for context, is just like right on the other side of this, there was a lot of accusations that WCW and NWA were like copying the WWF at this point, because they had crowned Ultimate Warrior as their champion, or were like pushing Ultimate Warrior right to the top there. And so they thought, some people were saying that this was some sort of reaction to that Sting was going to be the new top guy in WCW. But every account I could find, or anybody talking about that very situation, said it fully sticks to the story that no, Dusty Rhodes saw Sting at Clash of the Champions in that match with Ric Flair, and was that's a guy. That's the number one guy. He's going to be money. It was like that day they planned to push him to the very top one at some point. And if there's any complaints that they have, it's that they missed their timing just because of the injury. They just didn't get him there as quick as they would have liked to have, or as when he was as hot as they would have liked. Right. But I think watching this match,
it's not a surprise too that the Ultimate Warrior and Sting had similar trajectories. I mean, Ultimate Warrior had done work in world class as Dingo Warrior and all that, and he had a good look, and that was what the WWE was going for, WWF was going for at the time. But it's very clear in the record that at this point, Flair and Dusty were only willing to give the title to two other people, which would have been either Sting or Barry Windham, and that's it. So if it hadn't been Sting, it would have been Barry. So the NWA is never reactionary. Everybody else is reactionary.
Right. So let's talk about the card. Let's just jump into it. I mean, just the actual events that are there. We could try to give context where we are, where we can. I was going to dig into everybody, but I thought Doc Stinson might have some more information too, possibly on this, and maybe will. But so like for instance, there was a dark match at the opening of this thing, and it was Dave Sierra versus Mr. X. I had never heard of either of these guys, just in my limited knowledge, but did find out Dave Sierra was actually the Cuban Assassin, so I'd heard that name before. But as far as I could tell, I mean, I haven't seen the match, but I've heard nothing to write home about. But that existed. So just so that's on the table. You had Jim Ross and Bob Cottle on the call, which was cool. I thought both of these guys did an amazing job. I love the voice of Gary Michael Capetta as the ring announcer. Gordon Solis there doing interviews, and your referees are Randy Anderson, Nick Patrick, and Mike Atkins. The very first match on this card was official match on the card was Brian Pillman versus Buddy Landell, and Brian Pillman hits the flying crossbody for the win over Buddy Landell. Dave Meltzer gave this 2 3/4 stars. Just so you know, I've got Dave Meltzer's star rating, so I hope you guys were really excited about that because I'll give them to you. But 2 3/4 stars for Dave Meltzer. It was cool, like seeing the fly. I remember thinking Brian Pillman was like the most high-flying acrobatic SOB in the world, but you could just tell, like at this time, that flying body press is a big deal that he hits that thing on Buddy Landell. I am curious about what you know, Doc, about Buddy Landell, like as far as this Nature Boy gimmick. Like, what is he doing here? That seems like a piss poor decision.
No, Buddy Landell was a legit guy. There was even some talk. Buddy Landell in his shoot interview, I think with the RF video, talks about there was even some conversation at one point about them discussing putting the belt on him. Ric Flair actually really appreciated Buddy Landell and liked the gimmick. And at one point, Buddy Landell wore the national championship. He was managed by J.J. Dillon. The other person in J.J. Dillon's stable, of course, was Tully Blanchard, Tully Blanchard Enterprises. And I mean, Buddy Landell was over like Rover, man. He was cool. They ended up not putting the belt on him, according to Landell now in his shooter interview. And I've not heard Flair. I don't think I've heard Flair verify this, but Landell said that he missed the call because he was basically cracked out. He was cracked out on cocaine, and he uses that as to leverage his, sort of public service announcement about being clean and not letting opportunity pass you. I just thought this was interesting because you see this match, Brian Pillman is on the ascent. He would come in as, in the Cincinnati Bengals trunks. He had this really amazing run where he had this undefeated streak going on. And eventually, I think, loses that streak to Lex Luger, if I'm not mistaken. But Buddy Landell was in decline. And JayCal points out that Buddy Landell had terrible demons, which he did. And this is something that badly damaged him and would eventually kill him. Landell had something of a recuperation in his career. I think he wrestled for Smoky Mountain for a while. Ended up becoming an evangelist and trying to do some good work there. And then eventually, with some health issues and some other things, had died tragically not too long ago. But I actually always liked Buddy Landell, and Flair and Buddy Landell cut some great promos, man. Where Flair would always call Michael P.S. Hayes the poor man's Ric Flair, and he would say the same thing about Buddy Landell. But evidently, behind the scenes, there was a great deal of personal respect between the two. And Ric Flair would tell Buddy Landell, hey, if you're going to be this person, if you're going to carry this, you've got to act the part. You've got to come in business suits. You've got to carry yourself with a degree of professionalism and dignity, which that standard is for really for all of us is the standard for what a good world champion is. It's the kind of standard that Adam Pearce would carry, with the dignity and not necessarily business suits, but hey, I'm gonna maintain that seriousness and elevate the company by my person. Adam Pearce did that well. Dan Severn did it. Dan Severon did it, and certainly Nick Aldis does it now. But this is not like a fluke. This is really, when you're looking at Buddy Landell, you're looking at someone who's got a really important place or part to play in the National Wrestling Alliance. And again, he'd had demons, or he would have been much better. But again, not to filibuster, but evidently, according to Landell, there were talks about actually putting the belt on him for a time. And then I see that JayCal is asking me to tell about the other Nature Boy. That would be the Nature Boy Paul Lee, who has quite an active persona here in the Southeast and has done some Smoky Mountain work. He's a good friend of mine, actually one of my best friends, and we've known each other for quite some time. Oh, he's talking about Charles. I see WWE. Talking about the little Nate, Charles Robinson. But
Yeah,
we can
that's
talk
little
about
names.
Paulie and Charles Robinson at a later time. But there have been many people that have worn that Nature Boy title. It's not just been Paulie or Buddy Rogers or Buddy Landell or Ric Flair. There have been others too. Though, Buddy Landell, Flair, and Buddy Rogers are probably the big ones. But to me, this is one of those ones where we're talking about not a lot of great story writing going on, but some really interesting gems in there. Brian Pillman, who's on the ascent to become one of the most important names, and Buddy Landell, definitely in decline by this point. But hats off to Buddy Landell, one of the greats, one of my favorites.
Well, actually, what you're saying backs up a little bit. I thought it was interesting that I just thought maybe he was way off, but I guess not. Wade Keller wrote about this match that he thought the finish to this match was very surprising because he had been writing that Landell could actually end up being Flair's replacement someday. And so he seemed a little put off by this too. And thought it was weird that Brian Pillman went over. But I was just put off by the fact that he's looks like he's directly ripping off Ric Flair, just going with the hair and the robe and everything.
Well, I mean, that's it though. The Nature Boy gimmick, it is that though. And it's not just, people say that Flair ripped off Buddy Rogers. Buddy Rogers certainly had his own little spin on it. He wasn't going woo. Ric Flair tells us where he got that from, but certainly the bleach blonde and the attitude and the strutting around, that it's not really a ripoff. It's just, that's your character. That's the moniker that you take. And Buddy Landell was in that tradition of Nature Boys. And Paul Lee here in the Southeast, he does the same thing. He calls himself the real Nature Boy Paul Lee. And actually there's some pretty interesting footage on YouTube where Ric Flair gets into the ring and presents Paul Lee with a copy of the 10 pounds of gold and says, "Hey, I acknowledge that this is the new Nature Boy." And it's pretty interesting because there's another guy that you might recognize standing in the ring when that happens. And that's none other than yours truly, the good Doc McLovin, Rob Stinson. I was there that night in the ring.
Were you?
Yes.
That's good to know. So see, this is why we hired the Doc, because we get a lot of insight and even matches just like this with Brian Pillman and Buddy Landell. The next thing that happens is Will, did you have anything you wanted to add about the Brian Pillman match? I didn't mean to overlook you there.
No, I just as well thought it was interesting to start the show with a Nature Boy match and end the show with a Nature Boy match. I was just trying to think of, the modern day equivalent, if someone came into the NWA and they were the National Treasure, the Dealer, Joe Schmo. It would just be really weird, it just wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying, Rob, about, it's not necessarily a gimmick. It's almost like a genre or a personality or whatever. But Ric Flair just historically has made that so famous. It's really hard to, if you're a modern wrestling fan, and that's obviously a name that or even just people in culture know the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and to see someone else doing that same gimmick, it really does come off as a ripoff. But hearing that context and that history really shone some light on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing, since we're pointing out weird things about this show too, I noticed that in none of the matches, literally none of the matches.
Can you hear me?
Oh, hey, there you are. Yeah,
okay,
I just thought you were real squiddy eyed for a second. So
no, my internet here is going in and out, so it does that from time to time. I was going to say you're absolutely right, Will. Today in 2020, it does seem weird, but remember, Buddy Landell, he gets his start in the early 80s, and Ric Flair was already important, but he was still, he was not Ric Flair. I mean, by 86, 87, Ric Flair was a cultural icon for sure. But Buddy Landell is already, he's active in 83, 84, 85, and 86, and he's doing that Nature Boy thing too. So for someone in 1990 that had been like a JayCal today who's been studying this thing, that would be very appropriate to see Buddy Landell in there, and it wouldn't have been off-putting. Buddy Landell was calling himself the genuine Nature Boy or the real Nature Boy back in 86 and 87, challenging Ric Flair. And that was sort of the theme. I don't know that they ever really I don't think that feud ever got to materialize. I don't even know. There may have been, and I could be just, I don't know that they ever actually wrestled before. JayCal is going to know that. Anyway, it wouldn't have seemed as strange in 1990. People in 1990, that fan base is going to know very, very well who Buddy Landell is, and many people are going to be surprised that this upstart Brian Pillman will get the win the way he does in that match.
Gotcha. So Harley Race comes out and he cuts a promo, kind of giving a prediction there that if Ric Flair is not entirely on his game, he's going to be in trouble tonight. That Sting has everything it takes to beat him, and Ric Flair better look out. But tonight he's going to be taking on Tommy Rich, and and that goes back a long way. And he's going to deal with him in his own way, he says. It's interesting to see the at this time, I guess, a 7-time world champion Harley Race. And the next matchup is Captain Mike Rotunda versus Iron Sheik. Meltzer gave this one 3/4 of a star, and says that Sheik looks like he's pregnant. That was the main note that I got out of that. And the Wade Keller version of this is this match, although a singles rematch from WrestleMania 1's tag team match, had little meaning for most fans. An okay battle of suplexes with a lot of stalling by Sheik. And he was more generous. He gave it a full 1 star. And the interesting part for this one for me was, I guess this is in some kind of transition period for Mike Rotunda, because it's like he had been the Varsity Club guy. Later he'll go on to be like IRS, obviously, but at this point he was like a boat captain. And I had read, and I researched this a little bit more, that he originally, this match was going to be Mike Rotunda versus Harley Race, and that was switched up. And I couldn't find if this is exactly pinned to this, but if not, it's very ironic that they changed this matchup, because Mike Rotunda is a boat captain kind of guy in this. But if Wade Keller in his Pro Wrestling Torch in the week before this, let me see if I can find this here real quick. Sorry, I had it like right in front of me and then lost it. This is literally the week before. Camden County, New Jersey. Harley Race was arrested on I'm sorry. He wrote this in the week before, but on June 10th was cited for operating a boat under the influence of alcohol, careless operation of a boat, and resisting arrest. Race was scheduled to return to the NWA on July 7th for the Great American Bash pay-per-view in Baltimore for one match. Hit a boat from behind on Sunday morning on the Lake of the Ozarks. The accident sent 4 on the boat that were struck to the hospital, including one woman with 2 broken legs and her husband suffering from a collapsed lung and internal bleeding. 2 others were treated for cuts and bruises. 2 children also on the boat were not injured. Race was not injured, although his boat was completely destroyed in the crash. There is no word as of press time whether this affects his scheduled July 7th date with the NWA, though it is expected he will be able to fulfill his commitment. So would have been real weird if Harley Race had faced off against boat captain Mike Rotunda in this match. But that, not to make light of those poor people, but just anyway, just an interesting side note, I thought. So we got Mike Rotunda versus Iron Sheik instead. And yes, this is probably on the latter stages of the Iron Sheik being a singles wrestler. In fact, I would say probably by this time, Iron Sheik seemed like he maybe would be more of an appearance guy, like maybe throw him in some tags, something like that. But that would be my opinion. But I don't know. I'll throw it to you guys. Any thoughts on Mike Rotunda versus the Iron Sheik?
Yeah, I think this was just another example. There was no storyline. There was nothing to hook you in to and have you buy in at all to the fact that they would be fighting each other. And yeah, I think the Iron Sheik at this point was still under contract, and they would bring him back occasionally to put guys over or whatever. And then eventually, not long after this, I'm pretty sure they just told him to stay home, and they would just pay him to stay home because just like in matches like this, he wasn't doing anybody any favors. So, yeah, I mean, it was a lackluster match, and it definitely was an interesting time for Rotunda. And I just don't think the crowd was there. You can tell when you're watching it that there's just no buy-in. And when there's no buy-in, we talk about it a lot in terms of the NWA. That's why we love it, is every match feels important. Every match feels necessary, and it makes sense. And this was just one that didn't. And the crowd showed that.
And Stinson's asleep, so we'll move on.
I need to go get me another head of refill, another Gary head of refill real quick.
Okay.
Give me a half a head. Man. Give me a half a head of Gary.
You gotta be careful with that one.
All right, we're gonna move on to Doug Furnas versus Dutch Mantell, and we'll be there when you get back, I think.
Well, I can't leave during the Dirty Dutch talk.
That's a good point. No. we can stall for you, Rob, if you want. We can.
No, go ahead. Keep talking.
Anyway, Doug Furnas beats Dutch Mantell with a belly-to-belly suplex. Oh, here's the thing I was going to say earlier, by the way, that none of these matches, not one of the matches, seems like they ended in the way that you would expect them to end. No, like, finishers. Like, I thought that was just interesting. You know, you were talking about the start and the end. I thought that was interesting about this show. Like, nobody wins with, like, a signature move or anything like that. Like, it never happens. The only one that's arguable for me is possibly the Doom match a little later on, because I'm not 100% on what their main signature move was at the time. And maybe Doug Furnas, maybe his was the belly-to-belly suplex, but it's a nice belly-to-belly suplex on Dutch Mantell to get the win. Meltzer gives this one 1.5 stars. And yeah, not a huge fan. Actually doesn't even really say anything about it. Wade Keller just mentions that it looks like a solid match, that Doug Furnas looks like he's got a little promise, and Dutch Mantell has proven himself to be a good early in the card heel to face off against. Dutch Mantell would also be a perfect candidate for our sponsor, Manscaped.com, using the code NWAPod20, or I'm sorry, no, just NWAPod, gets you 20% off and free shipping from Manscaped.com. You do not want to go out in your tights or your beach attire with the hair like Dirty Dutch. Rob can tell you from experience, you just don't want to do that.
I thought today we were out on the Myrtle Beach boardwalk, and I was getting dirty looks, and I was like, man, do I not have my face mask on? And then I realized I had my face mask on. I was like, oh, snap. They're looking at me because I'm not Manscaped.
Yep. It is manscaped.com. I see JayCal asking in there. Manscaped.com. Use code NWAPod for 20% off and free shipping. They have an awesome lawnmower 3.0, and it will just take care of you. No nicks, no cuts, anything. You can even get that dirty Dutch hair right off of you with no issue. Manscaped.com. All right.
I will clarify that it's Manscaped, like past tense.com.
Yeah, I thought I was trying to do that there.
Like landscaped.
With a D at the end.
Manscaped.
Yes, manscaped.com. You mess with anything else here, I don't know. I don't know where that's going to go.
We can't be responsible for your search history if you type it wrong. That's all I'm saying.
That's a good point.
And if you happen to Google Manscaped and Dirty Dutch at the same time, that is not me in that picture. That's been doctored on your Google images. So
shout out to JayCal, who says he's going to place an order right now at manscaped.com. Make sure you put that D on the end there. You know that D. Anyway.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. No, I'm sorry. I get what you're saying.
I'm just saying, put the D. It's like if you try to search for like a grandfather clock, but forget the L. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be some trouble on your internet browser history. But anyway.
Man, you guys have to follow Gary on Instagram just to look at his collection of memes, man. I spend probably an hour a day looking at his memes, man.
Yeah.
Your wife messaged me the other day and was like, Rob took like 10 minutes looking at this one. Like, I forget which one it was now.
Hold on, my wife messaged you, bro? What?
Hey, my wife can vouch for the fact too that we'll be sitting chilling after the kids go to bed, and I'm catching up on my stories, and at least 5 or 6 times I'm like, I pause on it and I'm like, oh, look at this meme Gary shared, and I read it to her, and it's like a nightly topic of conversation. So I will put you over as well, Gary. Go follow Gary on Instagram at This Is Gary Horn. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Yeah, that's right.
So
at This Is Gary Horn.
And check out the daily stories. It's good for a laugh. And God knows we all need a good laugh every day.
That's why I started doing it, man. And, when I was on Jay-Z Flair show, they were asking about the memes. And I was like, yeah, it started because I was like, okay, I could post about serious crap all the time. But I don't know. People like to laugh.
The one about the 3D ultrasound, dude. That had me rolling for probably 45 minutes. I was just like, guttural laughing just so it hurt. It's so funny.
Yeah, man.
I liked your series. I liked your series you did with Pornhub comments. That one was
those were fun.
That was good. But yeah, I thought about asking you. I keep thinking, now that we're partnered.
I'm sorry,
up
this is not PG, but I have to say my favorite one of those is the I didn't just come, I arrived.
We're 14.
I still think about that one to this day. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
I keep thinking that I want, now that we're partnered up and we talk on a regular basis, asking you where you get them, but I don't want to know how the sausage is made. No pun intended. I just want to, I want to enjoy them every night on your stories. I don't want to find them, where you find them. So I'm going to let you keep curating those and entertaining.
By the way, when you say I don't want to know how the sausage is made, that's actually a line from Hamilton in the song No One Else Is in the Room Where It Happened. So shout out, Will.
Yep.
That's actually a line from My Sex Life. Anyway.
Dutch. Doug Furness.
Doug
like Furness
fire tonight. Like this is going somewhere.
Doug Furness was actually billed as the world's strongest man, right? Or strongest man in the world. Or something.
That's a good
trying
point.
To get us back on track.
No Mark Henry there. Yeah, no, I hear you. Doug Furness, belly to belly suplex, pins Dutch Mantel, and that is that match. Hope you guys dug it. James Lawrence threw in the chat also that apparently WCW, not long after this, I guess, forgot about Sheik's contract, and he got renewed for another year and just sat at home.
Yep.
I just forgot about him, I guess. All right. So then next up, you get a classic rematch. This is kind of weird, and it still weirds me out every time I've seen it now that it's in the middle of the card. Just there it is. Harley Race defeats Tommy Rich, which I think at this time was kind of an upset. Like, I don't think anybody expected. And Harley Race hadn't been just like a regular figure, as we mentioned. Like, he had been kind of out of it. And but he gets the surprise win with a roll through, and Rich comes off the top rope. I don't feel like the crowd was as into this as I felt like they should have been. But then again, this is 90, and Stinson can probably vouch for this. I think Rich and Race were feuding around 81-ish. So, like, maybe they're just too far separated from it. JR, I tried to look for some information on that, and JR just had some stuff about that, Race just was available, and it was a big pay-per-view payoff. And so he was like, if you don't want to book Harley Race when he's available for you to book, then you're not paying attention to wrestling. And as far as Tommy Rich had been kind of out of it, but was trying to work his way back. into wrestling and thought he had an opportunity here with Jim Herd and what they were doing in NWA. I don't think that really paid off for him as much as he had hoped. Meltzer gives it 2.5 stars. And let's see, that's I don't know. I didn't really have much else to add to that.
Well, Rich still had some career left ahead of him. He actually had, I think he was in the York Foundation. He was like a member of the World 6-Man Tag Team Championship. So he had the world title left in him when this had happened. Harley Race was certainly on the decline, but he would still have a big role later managing like Vader and he had still had a lot of stuff left in him too. But Tommy Rich would still be a world champion. I think twice. I think he was like with Junkyard Dog had it, and then I'm gonna Wikipedia this junk, man, but I think that Tommy Rich won the 6-man championship like not long after this. So it's not like he was like an afterthought. This match certainly didn't have the value that it would have had for someone like me who grew up in Georgia and remembered the Harley Race Tommy Rich feud. But it was still important to see Tommy Rich working, and he would. I'm gonna fact check myself, but I think that.
Well, that's cool. And I didn't mean to make it sound like Tommy Rich was a complete afterthought. I don't think that he was treated that way. I don't think either guy was treated like a complete afterthought or anything like that.
Right.
Wade Keller, though, writes here, Harley Race returned to beat Tommy Rich in 6 minutes. This was a rematch for their world title bouts in 1981, where Rich won and lost the NWA world title. Some got a charge out of the nostalgia, but it seemed more were disinterested. The finish was surprising. 2.25 stars, he gives it. So definitely not like a. Go ahead, Will. Sorry.
I think they didn't promote this match was a lot of what I had read. So I don't even think the crowd even was prepared to see the match. So with that in mind, I don't. That could attribute to the lackluster crowd. If there was some longtime fans there that knew the history, they probably would have popped for it. But overall, I don't even know if they publicized it, for ticket sales or anything. It was it really was kind of an afterthought. And for that reason, crowd wasn't really prepared for it. Again, they're not really bought into it unless they're familiar with the feud that was almost a decade old. And, it was a great match. 6 minutes, I feel like it was a perfect time. It kept me interested the whole time. If it had been really any longer than that, it might have drug on a little bit. But I think, those guys are top notch still at this point in 1990 and could put on a great match. So it was great, but it's just another victim of little to no storytelling for the current iteration of this match. And it wasn't a title match, and the stakes were not there.
And so it doesn't sound like I'm like completely crapping on it. Let me also say that I think if I'm right on my numbers here, like Race is like pushing 50 right here. And he's still, he looks like he can go with anybody. He looks good.
And Gary, I don't think you're crapping on it. I think that the promoters crapped on it. I'm not saying you did. I think that like Will's saying, I think this was underplayed. This is a match that like any three of us and most like everybody in the chat right now, we would have paid just to see that match. If that was we would have paid to see that. But this is like right now the promoters are booking towards and they're trying to really serve up things to the younger crowd. Nothing wrong with that. I think wrestling should speak to younger crowds. But, I remember like in 1990, this was an important match to me. The Harley Race Tommy Rich was, and Tommy Rich was not done yet. He still had another several years left where he was important. Now, he wasn't in the singles scene anymore, but, he was doing some tag stuff. I think he even turned. Yeah, he was in the York Foundation, so he had a heel turn, which is really peculiar for Tommy Rich. But this was not a bad match. If it had been marketed and the story writing had been done properly, this could have been maybe not a semi-main event, but an upper card match for sure.
Well, I think an irreverent modern day comparison would be Edge and Randy Orton that just happened, that was billed as the greatest wrestling match ever, which was laughable. But that was a feud that was almost a decade ago. But WWE put storytelling behind it. They had promos cut. They had multiple vignettes telling the history. So even if you didn't live that history, you still had a little bit of buy-in for that match. That this match could have had potential like that, but again, it was just booked terribly. There was just no storytelling there, and that's in wrestling. That's gonna bite you.
Hey, I just want to throw it out there real quick. Just in February of 1991, so this is just 6-7 months later, Tommy Rich would win the 6-man championship with the Junkyard Dog and Ricky Morton. They would lose it 4 months later to the Fabulous Freebirds, and then Tommy Rich would win it again in October 8th, 1991, as a part of the York Foundation with Richard Morton and Terrence Taylor, and they were the last to hold the title. So he had 2 more world championships, legitimate mainstream world championships ahead of him at this point.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, I mean, that's it is interesting here. I don't know. I think Will's like on the money as far as like, oh, and you kind of were saying this too, Rob, that it just was booked weirdly, like with no build to it at all. So that's probably why it suffered in front of the crowd. It's just because, especially in the next match coming up, that crowd does get lively. They just didn't do it in this one for some reason. They didn't get wild for this one. Yeah, JayCal in the chat's mentioning it'd be like Jeff Jarrett versus Ken Shamrock. It has historic relevance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So imagine a world, you talked about the 6-man title. Imagine a world where you got a 6-man title. Not only do you have a world tag team title, but you have a U.S. tag team title. And the very next matchup here is the Midnight Express defeats the Wild-Eyed Southern Boys for retains the U.S. tag team titles. Obviously, the weird part of this match is that you probably couldn't get away with having a Confederate flag all over your trench coat, like and the butt of your pants when you come out anymore. But I guess they also kind of played that for heel heat in the North during the time. But that aside, this match was fantastic. Like this match was awesome. And this is, I would, for my money, and I think for a lot of people, this is actually the best match on the show as far as a pure wrestling match. Dave Meltzer just notes I took from him, just wrote classic tag match, possibly the best match I've seen in the United States this year. Innovative martial arts, crowd is hot. I guess what I wrote down innovative martial arts. I think he talks a little bit about how it was innovative, the spot they use with the martial arts. Mm-hmm. And like as far as Wade Keller, he says, simply the best tag team match I have seen this year. This match saw a relatively new team, the Southern Boys, introduce their hot moves to the fans and to the Express. The Express returned with their mainstay moves and some fresh ones also. The fast pace kept fans in the arena on the edge of their seat. This is one of those matches where fans were cheering the wrestling, not necessarily a team. After several sure finishes that weren't, a kick to Armstrong's head by Lane and a small package by Eaton ended the nearly perfect encounter, lest we forget Cornette, who was entertaining enough to stand on his own without a match delivering or diverting attention away from him. Wade Keller gave it 4 3/4 stars. Dave Meltzer gave it also 4 3/4 stars. So almost a 5-star match out of these guys from the quote unquote experts. So what'd you guys think of Midnight Express versus the Southern Boys?
It was great. It was awesome. Definitely the best wrestling match of this event. Match of the year candidate at the time, for sure. I mean, you can tell just in Meltzer and Keller's write-ups about it. But I mean, that's the spots made sense. It was very well orchestrated. No doubt Cornette had a heavy hand in that. And I mean, if you listen to Cornette during this time, like they were not happy in WCW. They really wanted out, and nobody that had any wrestling sense was really happy at that time with Jim Herd. But they go out, they put on a barn burner. The spots were great. The pace was perfect. And I mean, this was a mid-card tag team title. So first of all,
this isn't even the world tag team titles.
So you guys know where I sit with tag team wrestling. For me, that's top notch. And I was just salivating at the idea of like, oh man, there's two sets of there's two tag title matches in this event. Like, this is incredible. But I mean, they came out and stole the show. And I mean, you talk about the Southern boys getting heel heat, and depends on whether you would consider Baltimore north or south, but they were over by the end of the match, really. I mean, like you said, like they mentioned in the articles, like this was one of those matches where people were cheering the wrestling. There wasn't like by the end of the match, there wasn't a clear delineation between like they were booing this team and cheering. They were just cheering the spots, and they were cheering the storytelling that was happening in front of them in the ring. And that's what you want from wrestling. That's what we love.
Oh my God.
I mean,
that pinfall, by the time this match is over, that crowd like erupts. Like, it is unlike anything you will ever see. I want to give a shout out to Curtis Butler in the chat saying, ladies and gentlemen, one of the best tag team matches in the history of wrestling.
I agree.
And I agree with that. And he does point out too, just for anybody who cares, Cornette does go in depth on his podcast just the other day. If you want to check that out, they do like a rewatch, so like you can time it with the playing of the match, and he does like a commentary of the match. But sorry, I think I cut you off, Will.
No, I'll just continue putting it over because I'm a nerd for tag team wrestling, and this was a clinic from not the Midnight Express weren't a surprising. I mean, they put on tag team clinics all the time. But the Southern boys were the surprise for me, that just how they got over and how they worked together and how they worked with the Midnight Express. I mean, I think Beautiful Bobby carried the match for most of it, but the storytelling was there, and the false finishes. I bit on almost all of them. That's how good they were. And we live in an era where, in mainstream wrestling, false finishes are kind of an eye roll. But they did it well, and they reminded me that false finishes, when done correctly, are amazing, and they're a great part of the story. They weren't overdone. It was great.
I don't want to step on Rob here, but I just want to say I'm glad you brought up Bobby Eaton real quick too, because man, I'm with you. I think we share a love of tag team wrestling. I mean, I've talked endlessly about how Crockett Cup's perfect because I love tournaments and I love tag teams. Stone Cold Steve Austin always talks about Bobby Eaton. Like, I used to listen to his podcast all the time, and he'd be talking about how Bobby Eaton was like one of his favorite wrestlers ever. And I never got it because I didn't know, like, the Bobby Eaton I knew was like way later, and he just wasn't the same dude. And I've had the pleasure of meeting and talking to Bobby Eaton at Crockett Cup 2019, him and Stan Lane and Dennis Condrey. But man, like, when we've done these cast watch parties and at the suggestion of Rob, like some of the shows we've watched or some of the shows we've shown, like every time Bobby Eaton is in the damn ring, that guy he could go like nobody else. Like, that guy is so good. And I see JayCal in there saying I need to go back and rewatch. Yeah, if I was going to direct somebody to this show, obviously Sting and Flair holds a special place in everybody's heart. That's fine. But the actual match, like if you want to see like a match you're going to invest in, Southern Boys and Midnight Express, my God. And yeah, and Bobby Eaton is by far the all-star of the whole freaking pay-per-view, in my opinion. But anyway, I've talked enough. Rob.
It doesn't surprise me that Stone Cold says that. Stone Cold, he was a tag team contemporary of the Midnight Express in the Hollywood Blondes with Brian Pillman. They had a run, and he's got extensive tag team work going back to the world class days and all that. So, he knows, and you're absolutely right. Bobby, any version of the Midnight Express is arguably one of the greatest. I happen to think the Sweet Stan Lane and Beautiful Bobby Eaton version is the best. and they are if they're not at their peak at this point, they're certainly close to it. And you mentioned the karate earlier, and they always made a point to say that that Stan Lane was a black belt, and that would always kind of manifest itself. And here we have them against the wild-eyed Southern boys, Steve Armstrong and Tracy Smothers, one of the, in my opinion, one of the unheralded tag teams, very underrated tag team. And I'm not going to say anything new that you guys didn't say tonight. This is really one of the greatest tag team matches ever. I mean, it's in terms of like four guys who can work each other and go in there and wrestle and tell a story. And you got a healthy combination of mat wrestling and high spots and this kind of stuff. It is a very wonderful, just sublime tag team match. So go back by all means. I'm confident that when JayCal goes back and watches this, man, he's gonna give it a 5 out of 5 star on the Alliance blog rating. So it's a great match, guys. It definitely. I mean, there's some other matches that had more of an emotional appeal to me, like the Harley Tommy Rich match, and of course Flair Sting. But this is a great match. It's a great match.
Why do we can't spend like all night long talking about this match? But I just want to throw back to like something you. I want to go back to something else you said about it. One thing I really loved is like we mentioned the karate spot. It wasn't like that the karate spot was like so athletic, it was insane. It's like it's nothing compared to crap you see now, but it's like it meant more. Like it just like just the idea that these guys have been wrestling, and then all of a sudden, yeah, there's that idea that Stan Lane is a black belt. Well, it's like, who was it? It was like Tracy Smothers, I guess, like probably that was like on the other side of him. They're like, oh, well, he knows karate. Now he's trying to throw a kick. Oh, well, Stan Lane wants to challenge him. Like, let's do a face-off. Let's do a karate face-off. And so they like make it a whole thing. And it's just like, I think that's what Meltzer's even talking about. It's just innovative, like how they use that to make a whole segment of the match just feel like something. And it's not like they're like doing anything insane. It's just, you're into it. You're like, oh my God, now they've wrestled. Now I want to see what happens if they go karate on each other. Like, it's just awesome to watch.
And I hope people will give it a fair watch when they go back and look at it. And I'm not addressing anybody here who watches our show or is in our chat tonight, but don't take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to sound like a neo-Confederate. I'm a Lincoln guy. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. But, it was not uncommon in those days for people to use a Confederate gimmick. The Freebirds used it for years. And the culture and the times were different. But if you can get over that and not let that be off-putting to you, you are going to enjoy this match. I mean, don't let that stand in your way. Not that it would, again, for anybody in here, but man, what a great match. And, I'm afraid that for many people, just the fact that they're the wild-eyed Southern boys coming out with Confederate flags on their back, that this is going to be off-putting, but it shouldn't be. At least not for the storytelling that's going on inside the ring, because it's a fantastic match.
Well, again, that could be like my, different POV, but like I that got me as far as like, oh, hey, you couldn't do that anymore. And
I wasn't thinking about you, Gary,
much of it. Yeah.
But since you raised that, there, no doubt somebody is going to see this, or somebody we've been throwing this up for 2 weeks now. Someone's going to look at that and be put off because of that. And it was just a different time. I mean, when the Wild-Eyed Southern Boys came out, they were in Georgia. They were over, man. And the last thing I thought when I saw them was anything about the Civil War. I just thought, hey, they Southern boys, But it shouldn't be off-putting from a wrestling standpoint, from a ring work standpoint, because it really is a fantastic match.
No, they were working with what they had. It's almost a little disappointing that if that was a Matt classic, the next one is a Matt legend. It's the debut of Big Van Vader. He comes in to face Mr. Tom Zink. And they do a great intro for Tom Zink. I heard like Conrad talk about in his interview with JR that this was they gave Tom Zink the Hogan treatment here, because like Hogan was the only one that had like the camera follow him to the ring, like walk with him down the aisle and everything. And it's like,
I noticed that.
I noticed that. Yeah. And he was like, but completely opposite of Hogan, Tom Zink was going to die. And, but yeah,
I love Vader. I mean, I've said it before on the show, but I mean, Big Van Vader was one of the guys from my childhood that I was actually terrified of, and not in any small part because of that headdress. And one of the things that I loved about this match is, so this was his debut, right? He had not appeared in WCW before, but what I thought was hilarious was, you know, he's got the horns or whatever it is, that headpiece that he wears, you know, brings it down. You guys have all seen it, sets it down, points to it, and the steam shoots out. And JR could just not get it. He was just like, there's no wires connected to that. How? It was just like, JR was selling that headpiece and the steam thing like more than he had sold any of the moves for the whole night. There's nothing connected. How's he doing that? What is that? You know, and it was just like,
Well, I was just gonna say, like, even weirder though is like Bob Caudle over there, just like going off about it's a traditional samurai headwear.
Oh
like
yeah,
that. I'm not 100% sure that's accurate, buddy. But
well, I mean,
fair enough.
Vader was coming from Japan, right? And he still worked in Japan a lot after this, because I think it was like months and months before he would be a regular on WCW. It was a process. I mean, he debuted and then he'd work odd dates here and there when he was available. But I mean, Japan is where he was making his money. And at this time he had not, right? He hadn't signed full time at this point.
Yeah, according to JR, who was involved in some of these things, like he describes it as like they just knew they liked Vader, and actually heard, and Ole, especially Ole, was a big fan of Hansen and Vader, Stan Hansen and Vader, and wanted to bring them in. And so Vader was definitely by far getting more money in Japan. He was, of course, huge there. Same with Hansen. So they were just like, JR describes it as like, hey, we know how this thing ends. This whole pay-per-view ends, and it ends with a fresh, new, like young baby face, and he's going to need big bads. And who are some guys we can bring in? And like Vader was definitely one of those guys.
Yeah,
and,
not
so
to discount the Four Horsemen, but this was not, at this point in time, this was not like the real Four Horsemen. There's probably a lot of debate about that, but they definitely, I mean, when you think about it, they needed more like monster heels like that. And so I think that was, yeah, what they were going for. But so here's our tie-in, as you were mentioning before. So I think it was just a couple months before this, you talked about Stan Hansen had actually knocked Vader's eye out of the socket in Japan. And that's an eye for an eye match. Not this crap we're running now in 2020. I'm talking about these dudes were pounding on each other, and Vader's eye freaking fell out of the socket. What was it like? There you go. If you want an eye for an eye match, that's it.
That's legit. You can look that up on YouTube. Vader absolutely loses his eye in the middle of the match. It's still connected, so you know he gets it put back. But,
just dislodged.
Yeah, but that would have been the end of my match if my eyeball came out. And I've always wondered, can you still see out of that eye? Like, is one eye staring at the ground?
That'd be gnarly, really man. You can like.
Yeah, I mean, it was still connected. It was still connected to the receptor. So yeah, it's like he was.
Hey Gary, come over. I'll knock your eye out. We'll check it out.
No, well, let's not do that. I hate eyeball violence in general. So that was always
eyeball violence.
And JayCal in the chat points out, not only did it get knocked out, he decides the best fix up for it is that he's got to finish the match. So he puts it back in. Like he shoves it back in the socket.
What else are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You're just gonna leave it there now? You put it back.
I don't.
What you do
I
when
would
you're
go home. I would call my mom
You can't go home. You're in Japan. You can't just go home. You're in the middle of a match. You just pop that. You pop it back in and you finish. That's work ethic.
Be like, Mom, can you pick me up from the wrestling match? My eyeball is out. But but you know, different breed of dude.
Yeah, they'd be like, dang, Stinson just got up and he just took his junk and left. I just got out, I took my junk and walked out and left. That's it.
Oh man. Yeah. So what I enjoyed is like doing the looking back into this and JR on the podcast. So like Wade Keller says this about the match. Zeke, and he doesn't mean this as a knock, by the way, I don't think. He says Zeke proved that not only can he be a satisfactory tag team champion, but this match showed he would be a fabulous jobber. His facial expressions and selling for Vader were fabulous. Vader was not overly impressive. He played to the crowd a bit. 1 star. Dave Meltzer says, point is, Dave Meltzer gives it 0.5 star, so less. JR was aggravated about when he heard this news. He was like, this match literally accomplished everything we meant for this match to accomplish.
It's a squash match.
He's like, I'm not smart enough for you to tell me how it could be booked better to make this guy an unstoppable, unbeatable monster badass.
What were they gonna do? Were they gonna have Tom Zink get in some really good offense and get Vader knocked down several times? How are you booking him as this monster heel if Z-Man is cutting him down for half the match and then he comes back and it's a squash match. Squash matches, and this may be an unpopular opinion too, I don't know, everybody has different opinions in the wrestling community. In my opinion, squash matches absolutely have their place. Not all the time, they shouldn't be overdone, but when you're trying to establish a monster heel like Big Van Vader, you gotta have that squash match. To me, I'm not giving it 5 stars as a wrestling match, but I'm saying it's more than 1 star because you look at it in terms of storytelling and you look at it in terms of everything that happens in the ring matters and is important. This match needed to happen exactly the way it did. It was like, what, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes or something like that? I mean, it was really short. And that needed to happen to establish Big Van Vader as who they wanted him to be. So, I get it, you know. You're coming off of the greatest tag team match of the year, maybe all time, you know, contender. So I get it, but still.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird, especially coming off that match. But no, Vader's walking in here. He's 399 pounds of kick ass. Like, he's walking in here. He's going to destroy someone, and that's what he does. And like you pointed out, he's still working in Japan. It's literally going to be 7 months before you see him again in WCW, and he until he shows up, but guaranteed that dude's anticipated when he shows up. It means something when he shows up because you're like, I saw that guy, like he just slaughtered Z-Man in like 2 minutes, and so that was the point of it. That's what he's supposed to do. And yeah, I'm with you on squash matches. I used to like WWF Superstars when I was growing up. That's exactly what it was for. It was squash matches, like to make even heels. You're like, oh, these are obviously elite wrestlers. They've got finishers. They do things. They destroy people when they're in the ring. Like that's what you do. You make them mean something. If they just show up and lose all the time, then who cares?
Well, and that's part of the realism of it too. I mean, Tom Zink is an athletic, strong guy, but I mean, Big Van Vader's Big Van Vader. You look at the two side by side. I mean, it happened as it probably would in real life, in my opinion. So, I mean,
Rob, do you have anything to add about
I don't know
Vader?
what I was gone when you started. The one eternal thing that I remember from this match is like them going on and on about the mask and the steam and all that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And that impacted me.
That's that. Will brought that up with JR just like being obsessed with that.
He sold that. He sold it, man.
But I remember watching it. He's like, it's not. It's just he just put it down. The steam's coming. I was like, dang, he's right. Where is that? Holy cow! That's like.
I'll be honest. The last time we showed it on the cast watch party, I was like, so who does set that off? Like I was kind of watching it. Like, does Facebook have a remote? because he doesn't do anything. Like he just has his little V's and he's just like dancing around. And so I'm like, I don't know.
This is before Peter Jackson, and this is before Lord of the Rings and all that too. So we were like, dang, oh. I'm like, what? Did you say that?
Is there a cord? Is there a cord? JR said that's not connected to anything.
James Lawrence says Vader 2 also ripped off Cactus Jack's ear. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that was the guy. But one thing I do remember about Vader also is that when he does later get into a feud with Sting, like, I don't know, maybe if when we get there and we ever talk about it, like everybody's going to crap on the booking of this. But I remember being thrown off by those matches because I expected Sting to have the, like, well, he's the good guy. Like he comes back and he wins and he's great. He's Sting, and he doesn't. Like Vader just beats the snot out of Sting, like constantly. Like Vader like dominates Sting, and you're like, oh man, this is no bueno. Like I really like Sting, and Vader's murdering him too.
And Vader knocks Ric Flair's front teeth out, man, in their match.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yes. Like
Sting and Vader is one of my, just because I lived it as a child, is one of my favorite wrestling feuds of all time. Just because, I mean, I remember at Super Brawl one year they had a strap match. I don't remember exactly which one, but I don't even think it was for a title, and it was like the main event, and it was like, it was insane. I mean, it was definitely the greatest strap match of all time. But like those dudes they had some really good chemistry, and their feud was off the charts, in my opinion. Because as I said, as a kid, Vader was a scary dude in real life. Like I was really scared of him, and Sting was the ultimate babyface. And so that feud was just so much, to me, the perfect culmination of what wrestling should be. Good versus evil, pure good versus pure evil. Both of them were talented like crazy and could tell a good story in and out of the ring. And yeah, we need to get to that eventually someday where we can focus on that. But
well, I agree, because I think even though it's like we were kids, I mean, the one thing that I remember taking away from it, and like still to this day, the reason it stands out is like I remember Vader beating Sting, and at the time it was the first time I'd ever seen like, and Sting did an interview, I think, afterwards, as far as I recall, but like it was the first time, I'm used to seeing like the good guy doesn't always win, and like the good guy has to take his lumps too. And it was like not like somebody crotch punch Sting or something from behind or pulled the tide. So it was just like Vader just beat the guy, and it was just like it was I don't know, it was a awakening for me in my childhood.
You learn that good guys don't always win. And that was when I decided I was going to be a Vader. Before I wanted to be a Sting, but then I was like, I'm going to be a Vader. I want a mask that steam comes out when it's not even connected to anything.
Funny thing too, that Will does not catch the Star Wars reference here.
The who? Oh, is that like a Spock thing?
Well, yeah, I guess it is. I was gonna say that's a joke, but no, actually, yeah, I guess he is doing that thing. But anyway, Curtis Butler says the Vader versus Cactus Jack matches are some of the most fun matches I've ever seen. I do recall them facing off and they beat the hell out of each other. All right, we can't talk about Vader all night either, but this is why this pay-per-view was a lot better than I think it now. I think this pay-per-view is a lot better than it had any right to be. But moving on, you get the Freebird interview with Hayes and is that Jimmy Garvin? Yeah, and this is not the Freebirds I recall, but there they are, all glammed up, and Michael Hayes is good.
Hold on now. Now this is the Freebirds. I mean, Jimmy Garvin was always the fourth Freebird, so this not a.
Well, I'm thinking like Terry Bam Bam Gordy and
Buddy Roberts. They were the three, but Jimmy
Roberts
Garvin was always the fourth Freebird. Even in early days, like if you look at like Freebird Road and the old thing, Jimmy Garvin always made a little cameo. They always felt like he was the I don't know, through booking or whatever, but Jimmy Garvin is a legit Freebird.
All right, I'm sorry that I offended
Yes.
you, Robert. So I will say that you do get a sense of like even in this weirdness, and I don't mean this for any other reason than just like I remember the Freebirds being like also Confederate flag waving dudes, and they're like Leonard Skinner looking guys, and here they're like glammed up, like they've gone like glitter eyeshadow and all kinds of stuff, and but there's Michael Hayes does have a really good promo here, and I just was going to say that he did a great job. He has that like really cool line where he says like, "We're going to win, and there's two things you can do about it: live with it and learn to love it." And I don't know, for some reason that delivery on that line really got me. But unfortunately for them, they're up against the Steiners, and I will say Dave Meltzer gave this 3.25 stars, but the Steiners win with the second belly-to-belly victory of the evening when they deliver one there, and that's that. I mean, it was just kind of honestly, after everything else we've seen, I mean, this one didn't stand out like fully to me, but maybe you guys have more for me than that.
No, I mean, well, I'll answer JayCal's question because now it's relevant. He asked who my favorite tag team was. It's the Steiners. So I love this match just because it was the Steiners, but yeah, not really a lot at stake again. I mean, I sound like a broken record, I know, but when there's not a lot at stake and not a whole lot of storytelling, it's hard to really get the buy-in. So I think it was a good match because all four guys know what they're doing and they can do it at a high level. But yeah, and it has nothing to do with anything other than just historically, I'm not a fan of this version of the Freebirds. I think Cornette even calls them the fabulous fake birds at this point. And
yeah, suck it, Robert. Curtis Butler, by the way, side note in the chat saying, "I'm sorry, this is the great value version of the Freebirds."
Yeah.
Well,
so listen, that's no disrespect. That's no disrespect.
Value version of the Freebirds won the World Tag Team Championship. They won the World Tag titles and they lost it to the Steiners. This was a rematch.
That's fine. David Arquette was world champion. Now, I'm just saying.
Oh, come on, you gonna go there? Like that's the same. Like that, like this version.
Well, I mean, if you're going to use championships to validate something, I'm just saying.
WCW title.
I'm saying historically, this is not the version. When you tell me, when you say close your eyes and imagine the fabulous Freebirds, I do not picture this in any form or fashion. I picture the leather jackets, rock and roll, not glam rock Freebirds. So that's all I'm saying.
That's what I'm thinking too. Yeah, like. Bad Street USA, Freebirds.
You're young pups, and I remember even in the 80s when the Freebirds were Terry, Michael, and Buddy, that from time to time Jimmy would still join in, and he was always the fourth member. And
I'm not
always there.
I'm not
Nobody's arguing the history. They're just saying this ain't the cool version of the Freebirds.
I'm trying to say it's a great value brand of the Freebirds. I'm saying this is a real, true, legitimate version of the Freebirds that won the World Tag Team Championship, that lost it to the Steiners, and this is the rematch.
We're not talking
about. I love Curtis Butler in the chat too.
It's not eyeliner; it's face paint, just like football players wear.
The Steiners, back when you thought Rick was the crazy one. From Curtis Butler.
Compare them to football players. I don't know when the last time I saw football players covered in glitter, but okay, I can see what you're saying.
It's not glitter, okay? It's stardust.
All right, fine. Let's see. What did Wade Keller have to say? I'm sure you're interested. He said, a methodically paced match which saw the Freebirds work the crowd like never before. The Steiners were off a bit, not executing some of their trademark moves.
That's
a backflip belly to belly by Rick on Hayes, followed by a cover by Scott, led to the 3 count. He also gave it 3.25 stars. So not a bad rating from either guy, like a above average rating for both guys. But I don't know. This is another one of those things where it's like a belly to belly ends the thing, but come on, at this time, I'm not going to sit here and try to join the JayCal and Will Club and be all like, are we best friends now? Yeah, they're best friends. That's great. That's fine. But Scott Steiner was not my favorite I'm jealous. Okay.
You're jealous.
I am jealous. Scott Steiner wasn't my favorite wrestler at the time, but I will argue till the end of time that like at this time, probably the Frankensteiner was the greatest like finishing move of all time. So I was very disappointed that did not happen.
Oh, every Steiner move, Frankensteiner, the Steiner line, the Steiner kick, Steiner toe, drop toe hold, everything was Steinerized. It was great. I loved it. But I will say when I think of the Steiners, I actually like Rick Steiner better. And I think Rick Steiner is one of the most undervalued. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Do you need some glitter face paint to wake you up? If I put some glitter on, is that going to interest you suddenly?
Glitter's not going to do nothing, but a little dash of stardust will do a lot.
As I was saying, I think Rick Steiner is one of the most undervalued guys in history. I think we understand his value because we lived a lot of it, but that's just my take on it. But yeah, I mean, this wasn't the Steiner's best match of all time or anything like that, but I enjoy and am entertained whenever I see the Steiners in a match. But this was apparently the pay-per-view of belly-to-belly suplexes and cross bodies off the top rope, because this was another one of those.
It sure was. I'm ready to move on from this match because this is causing some division. I don't know if it's drinking or late night or whatever, but this is threatening to tear our podcast apart.
No, we're not moving on. No, I'm just kidding. I just remember, man.
Oh, man.
The Freebirds have always been one of my favorite, and I have always felt that this version of the Freebirds was a legitimate, very, very good version, and their title run was a lot of fun watching it. They had some great.
Okay, Rob,
and
Doc,
this match was
listen to me. No, in the history of the Freebirds, if you got to rank like a 1 through 4 version of the Freebirds, where does this one rank?
Well, I rank it 1 out of 1 because there's only one version, and it's Michael Hayes.
Oh my God! 40, all right. Anyway,
Roberts and Jimmy Jam Garvin.
There's a Horseman interview with Wyndham, Arn, and Sid. Ole's there. No Ric Flair. That we're gonna skip past that. We're gonna move right on to JYD, Elegante, and Paul Orndorff. They end up defeating Barry Windham, Arn Anderson, and Sid by DQ when Junkyard Dog gets tossed over the top rope. And my immediate reaction, by the way, was, what? Yeah, that was it. I did find this fun, though. I'll give you this. Dave says this. There's one thing I can say with certainty. It's that Elegante will make this company lots of money someday, assuming they don't push him too fast and burn him out before he actually learns to work.
Which coincidentally is exactly what they did. That's what's really funny.
Yeah. He says, in some ways, this was the worst match on the show. But I think that the Sid Elegante program can draw one huge house somewhere down the road, assuming they wait a long time to deliver it. Which is everything they did not do, by the way. But
yeah, we can assume
he didn't even rank this one.
Did not read that.
Yeah, it's terrible. Like it just what does Wade say? Action was good. Elegante was never legally tagged in. He did make physical contact once when he shoved some of the Horsemen. Vicious was great at getting heat, but actually kind of babyface heat. JYD was thrown over the top rope to end the match. 1 3/4 stars is what Wade gave it. But yeah, that's so disappointing. It's the Horsemen, dog. It's the Horsemen.
No, it's not. This wasn't.
Here we go.
These Horsemen did not have Stardust. Okay, that's the real Horsemen had Stardust.
Listen, Rob, I mean, what did you so as a guy who was around during this time, I'm interested in what your thoughts are. So you've seen the variations of the Horsemen. You've seen it go from obviously like JJ's managing Flair, Arn and Tully and Ole. You've seen it go to like Sting jumps in. You've seen it go to, well, the before Sting, I guess Luger jumped in, right? So Wyndham's in there, like, but now you've got this version that's Ole, and he's managing. He's in the place of JJ. Like, I'm just gonna tell you just straight up. I was listening to this with like JR. He was like, "Man, we didn't give enough credit where credit was due, and like we should have worked to get Tully back in there. This just wasn't right. Shame on us." Like that's what JR says. Like it's just like, and where's JJ? So like you've got Ole managing. It's Ric Flair, who can't even be bothered, by the way, to be in the promos or anything. And it's just Barry Windham, and it's Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious. Like where's your head at for the Four Horsemen during this time? Because that's your boys, right?
Yeah. I mean, for many of us, the essential components of the Horsemen were Arn and Rick, JJ to some degree, and then you had the revolving door. As far as I'm concerned, the best version, and there's some debate on this. I mean, you've got the first version was great with Arn, Ole, Tully, and Rick, but the best version, as far as I'm concerned, was Rick, Arn, Tully, and Barry Windham. And then there have been other versions of this. I mean, I'm going to be one of those ones who would say that I wish they had done more with Paul Roma, man. I like Paul Roma. I think he got a good look, and he gets a bad rap in retrospect. And I know that Flair and them don't have a lot of good things to say about him, but I think he's a victim of bad booking and all that stuff. But I never really felt Sid as a horseman. And again, I mean, in those days in 1990 as a kid, for me, it was only important that the most important pieces were Arn and Rick. So I don't know. What's your thoughts on that, Will?
I mean, I joke about it. The Four Horsemen, I agree with you in the sense that when Arn and Rick are there, there's validation. But yeah, to me, without Tully, it doesn't feel like the real Four Horsemen. It feels like another like knockoff. So, especially during this pay-per-view, I mean, you see this match, it's a non-finish, DQ finish, no real storyline. You got a gimmick in there with El Gigante. It didn't feel like it had the gravitas of a Four Horsemen match. You know what I mean? Like there should be a level of, I mean, the same way that you talk about the world title, when you think about the Four Horsemen, it should have that same prestige just because of what they built with that stable, and it was just not there. And it's just disappointing when I know a lot of the history and I've seen the Four Horsemen at their peak, to watch a match like this and to see the promo they cut earlier in the night. And the promo, Ric Flair wasn't there in the promo, and it just didn't have that same level of like I said, prestige. And so this match just didn't do anything for me. If anything, it like soured my view a little bit of this iteration of the Four Horsemen, just because they couldn't even squeeze out like anything interesting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think too, like there's something about there was something organic about Arn, Tully, Rick, and Barry, where they really were in real life. They were buddies. They really lived everything together, and that never seemed to quite be replicated. Now I thought that they kind of got close to it with Benoit and Dean Malenko. I don't know, maybe y'all thought that too, that they sort of captured some of that where it felt like it was important. Maybe it was just different because we hated the NWO and we hated Bischoff so much then. But yeah, Sid, I never
actually
really
heard a lot of arguments about that. Because I loved that version. I did. Yeah. I loved Malenko and Benoit, and it's because I forget where I was hearing this argument. I think it was Wade Keller and like Todd Martin. They were having this argument, like Wade Keller saying, and I'm sorry if I stepped on you, Rob, but
no, you're good.
Wade Keller was saying like he never considered that like a legit version of the Four Horsemen. He kind of stopped after the JJ, Barry, Tully, and Arn and Rick version. But like Todd Martin was a big fan of the Benoit and Malenko version. And he was saying that because for some people, the Four Horsemen represented the elite. Like it was like the elite wrestlers. And so I think for Keller, his point was that like Malenko and Benoit never seemed like the party animal types, like the, you know, like the Wild Knights, like super upper echelon members of society or whatever that like the others did. So I think that's the like discussion. So it's interesting. I was totally on board, and it was here in Greenville, South Carolina, by the way, where they did that, like where they brought him back, you know, where Arn was managing and Malenko, Benoit, and Mongo were there, and Ric Flair made his big return and stuff like that. So, I like that
like
version. But anyway,
most emotional nights, man, and maybe that's what I'm recalling. I totally get what they're saying, but yeah, I mean to tie it back into Bash 90, I just never, to me, like this. I mean, as long as Flair and Arn are in it, and as long as they say it's Horseman, you know. But you know, Curtis Butler's paraphrasing Arn, and I do remember Arn saying that the first 3 years are really the benchmark, and J.J. Dillon is part of that, and that's true. But you know, I mean, Arn and Flair were in the ring there with Mongo and Dean and Benoit, and that was a really vibrant time for the Horsemen, even though it wasn't the same feel. But as you know, this version didn't seem like it to me. It's like the Horsemen were. I mean, they weren't at the. I mean, they have a role in this too. I mean, you know, you got Ole having the stipulation here in the main event that we're going to be talking about and all that. So it's not like the Horsemen still weren't cohesive and functioning like they always did. But Sid just never felt right, man. And come to find out, it wasn't right. You know, we learned that just through some antics that happened later on and through some interviews and that kind of thing.
I was about to say, he and Arn never really he and Arn were not the best of friends.
Yeah. They didn't really stick together. Actually, they did stick together, and that's so maybe that's the problem.
Oh man, see a lot of hate in the chat for Elegante, but I'll tell you what. I mean, the thing I saw it. Like, I get what like Meltzer was saying about him in this match. Like, Arn sold for that dude like nobody's business. Like, Arn Anderson is just the best. He is just such a good wrestler. But like, he looks astonished, like just gobsmacked by this giant man across from him, and like that's money right there. But yeah, I think what Dave was saying is like if you gave him a chance to actually try to learn to do anything, to be an attraction like Andre the Giant, then maybe he could have been something. But no, they couldn't. There was no patience there. It was just like rushing him through. Next up, you get a Lex Luger interview and then a Paulie and Mean Mark interview. I'm just going to keep moving until we get into the match with Lex Luger versus Mean Mark Callis. Meltzer gives it 3 stars. Say what you will about Uncle Dave. He says here, I see potential in this Mean Mark. Great size and athletic ability. And supposedly the story is Bruce Pritchard, like, this is the match that he showed to Vince McMahon to say, like, we got to get this guy. And then at the time, Vince McMahon was just kind of like, I don't know. But let me jump here real quick. I don't know. Wade doesn't have much to say. He ends up giving it 2 3/4 stars. But the important part here is JR has an interesting story about this, that JR says that he 100% told Ole, like, you guys don't know what you got with this guy. There's not many people that are 6'9" and move like that dude moves. And that Ole told him, he said, JR, this kid is never going to draw a GD dime. And
as it turns out, Ole was right.
Right. JR says he then went. Now, this is, of course, JR's story. So, you know, we're telling it from his point of view. But JR says that he then went to Jim Hurd and just in a conversation said, hey, man, Mean Mark Callis's contract is up soon. I think this kid is money. Ole doesn't like him, thinks he's not going to draw any money, but I think we got to use him. And he said that Hurd was just like off in his own world. And it's like, I just back Ole. It's fine. Whatever with this guy. What's he done for us? Nothing. And he's like, yeah, but you haven't done anything for him either. Like he's not doing anything. Like you haven't done anything. And Hurd's like, it's just let him go. And they offered him some like small amount of money, but JR says he behind their backs went to Mark Callis and said, these guys will never use you like you're supposed to be used. They don't know what to do with you. Get out. Like, you've got to get out of here. And so me and Mark Callis took the offer that he got from WWF and went over there and then disappeared into obscurity, never to be seen or heard from again.
Yeah, just became a jobber.
Right. And so anyway, that's the story there. But Lex Luger does get the win over me and Mark here. Not with the torture rack. He gets out of that, but does end up getting the win. Never saw that coming, did you? Lex Luger beats The Undertaker.
And little did we know, we had just seen El Gigante and now The Undertaker. Little did we know, WrestleMania 9, these two guys would be squaring off. El Gigante in a bodysuit.
Oh my God, that is right. What was he called then?
Giant
John Gonzalez.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this match, the only thing I really remember from watching this match was that he almost got him in the torture rack, right? Didn't he? Was that this match?
Yeah. Like, he threw him up in the torture rack, but like he hits like the ref or something on accident.
Oh, he kicked the ref in the face. Yeah. Yeah. Other than that, not really memorable.
Yeah. Nothing too much to this. So we can move right on to Doom beats the Rock and Roll Express. I'm going to be honest with you. This was another one that I was just kind of like not blown away by. 2.25 stars from Dave Meltzer. Wade Keller says the match was a solid tag match, but the fans did not get into it as they were already at this point anticipating Flair Sting. Top rope shoulder block by Butch Reed on Gibson led to the pin. 3.5. He gives it. So just like shouting those guys out. I know a lot of people, by the way, hate Dave Meltzer and Wade Keller and those guys, but I also know that they legitimately do talk to these people. That JR regularly had Dave Meltzer on his show, and Dean Ambrose, the first person he went to was Wade Keller. And so it's like, I do believe they have inside information a lot of the time. I know they're considered dirt sheets, but they've also been covering this business since the early 80s, Dave Meltzer longer. And so I feel like they've got valid opinions. So
yeah, they should be respected. I know that they can be, especially Meltzer can be outspoken sometimes, but they have to be respected. You don't have to agree with we're talking about performance sports here. And just like we can sit here and talk about baseball and football and have different opinions on different things about who would do this and what this value had. The point is, those guys, Keller and Meltzer, are two of the most informed people in the history of wrestling. Up there with JayCal. He's one of them too, man. And they have to be respected. So when they say something, you don't have to agree, but you ought to respect and consider what they're saying and give it a lot of weight.
Here I am. I've got Wade Keller. I've got Dave Meltzer. I've got JayCal, Bruce Mitchell, and Todd Martin. Those are my five. Like, that's my Mount Rushmore. Even though there's more than four, that's my Mount Rushmore of like, let's listen to their opinions on things. Yeah. That's and
I like Dave LaGreca too, and of all the PWI contributors, Solomon, I think, it's got an important voice as well. But you don't always have to.
Good, yeah.
But you've got to listen to them if you intend to be a student of the sport. These are the professors. So,
and with guys like Meltzer and Wade Keller, I mean, they're, if nothing else, just the archive. I mean, we're using their notes from an event that was 30 years ago. They've been doing this a long time, and just the archive of records that they have kept is enough to, be impressive.
Well said. I mean, they provide like a lot of, like, I feel like for this event they provided a lot of context that I did not have. I did not realize half the stuff was going on that, like, I just viewed this as like my kid self. I had no access to these people. I didn't know anything about them. And so it was interesting now to research it through their eyes, and they're already digging into the business and seeing the side of things, like the whole Flair drama that's kind of hanging over all of this. Like Ric Flair, the biggest star in the business, arguably, is considering leaving the NWA at this time.
Yeah, I had no
in a weird place, by the way. I got to throw in there that just even from every story that I can get, what a weird place to be in. And we're getting to this match right now, that Ric Flair at this time is a dude who he's Ric Flair. And he's also like, I promise that I'm going to give this kid, like, I'm going to drop the title to this kid, Sting. I'm going to do it. And I'm honoring that promise that I made, and I refuse to give it to anybody else. It's going to him. And also, like, I feel like the company that I'm representing while I do that is about to toss me aside. Like, that's legitimately, like, any other story you get is that, like, Flair very much had the idea that WCW at this time did not give a damn about Ric Flair. Like, this was supposed to be like Ric Flair is no more, like, we're changing with the times, let's move on. And despite all that, Ric Flair is still also honoring this fact that he's like, I'm gonna do the thing and hand this title over honorably. And I don't know, man, that's just a big deal to me, despite like what anybody could say. Like, I think that says something about what this business meant to people, and like even beyond like every other aspect of their lives, like, this business demanded respect. Like, they were like, I can't disgrace this business. I could be like some loudmouth party animal and like ruin every other aspect of my life, but I will not disgrace this business. And it's a weird thing, man. It's just interesting part of the story.
Well, I think Ric Flair, I mean, he's a legend for a reason, not just his accomplishments, but his smarts and his intuition in the ring and out of the ring. And I think he just wasn't going to give in to the backstage politics that were going on, because he was smart enough then to know it was bigger than just his career. And so even if he was on his way out and there were question marks there about his future with the WCW or with the title or whatever, I think even then he knew Sting's going to be a big star. He's going to be a guy that three bearded guys are going to be talking about 30 years from now. That's how big of a star he's going to be. So I'm not going to just take this lightly, even if I'm not committed to this company or the people who are running it or whatever. He respected the title, number one, as we talk about a lot on this show, the prestige of a world's title, and the fact that, he promised it to the guy, yeah, but I think it was more than just a promise. I think he promised it to Sting because he knew that Sting had the potential to carry it to the future. And I mean, we'll probably talk about this, but I mean, this wasn't like the beginning of like a Sting dynasty or anything like that. I think he dropped the title back to Rick 7 months after this, but like I think Ric Flair is just smart enough, even in 1990, to know that despite what was going on backstage, I need to do what's right to the fans, to the business as a whole, to the art of professional wrestling. And I promised it to Sting for a reason. And it wasn't just because he promised it. It was because there was a reason that he promised it. And so him honoring that was just him going with his intuition and his knowledge of the industry and the fans and what was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I see Jason like in the chat, and God bless you, sir. Thanks for joining us. but it's like he says, Rick didn't have much choice, I don't think. Well, the thing is like he did have a way to handle, like a choice in how he handled this whole process. I mean, we've seen people handle these things poorly, I think, and it's just that he didn't want his backstage BS to interfere with the process of what happens with the NWA World's Championship. Like he was like, like this isn't working out for us. I'm on the way out, but I'm still going to make sure this changes hands, even if I disagree or if I'm not on board with everything that's happening. He's still making sure he shows up to deliver the championship to the next rightful owner as he sees it. So I just think that's a really cool move of him. And that brings us to the main event of the night. Sting does end up beating Ric Flair for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. It gets a 3 3/4 stars from Dave Meltzer. The biggest problem from everybody, I think Wade gives it a let's see here. Wade gives it also 3 3/4 stars. But they're both, the biggest thing that they give it, both men had the same thing. That's also, by the way, how I feel like sometimes this is valid. They're like both throwing out their opinions and it's like decently similar. They said that it ended up like it should have been a 5-star match. Like people were expecting a 5-star match and it ends up being a typical Flair match is what they both say about it. Is that which makes it hard because Sting is coming off of an injury and they've been very careful about how they use him prior to this moment. So it's very obvious that Flair is carrying this match and he's doing a Flair match, and it works emotionally, gets a big pop. The crowd is into it. But they think that, it's like 16 minutes. If you call it the last, I think I saw somebody say, like, if you call it the last 3 minutes, you got the whole story. There's nothing special particularly about the match as a whole. It's just the story that was told here that matters.
So when I saw this match, I was 15 years old in those days, and again we're talking hindsight here, and I wasn't as old as I wasn't an insider writer or scholar of the sport back then. I was just a fan. But in 1990, Flair couldn't be beat. I mean, when Flair lost the belt, it was newsworthy. He didn't regularly lose the belt. His title reigns would last for years. Whether you drop it from time to time to Von Erich or to Dusty or on a fluke to Ronnie Garvin, Ricky Steamboat, he always got it back, but it was not a foregone conclusion that Flair was going to lose this thing. And remember, leading up to this match, Flair had a series of main event matches with the likes of Lex Luger and some others, mainly Luger, I think, where somehow, some way, the Horsemen always found a way to intervene to protect the title and to keep it on Flair, even at Capital Combat. Now, I know we kind of squirm at Capital Combat, but that was like, these were like under impossible circumstances for the Horsemen to interfere, and they somehow managed to raise the cage and get in. And so as a 15-year-old watching this match, I did not think that Sting was going to win this thing. I didn't. I thought they would find another way to do it. And so, for me, it was special. I mean, it was really, really a big deal that Sting came out. I was a Flair fan, but when the title changed hands, it was a newsworthy seismic shift in the environment. And I remember like being just stunned that night. A lot of people, they would talk about, I think even in the pay-per-view, talk about this would be an upset. And in hindsight, we think, well, of course it's not an upset because Sting would eventually come in the latter years of the Flair-Sting rivalry, especially in the WCW days, Sting would come to dominate it. But that wasn't the case in 1990. And so I just, memory plays a big factor in this. So we got to place ourselves back in Baltimore in July of 1990 and realized that the landscape was different then. Flair was still on top. Flair still hasn't. Here's another thing I wanted to point out, and maybe we'll get to this in some of the epilogue, but Sting getting the belt also has a very historic role to play too, because Flair has another title change. Remember, at this point, there's a series of title changes that weren't recognized. At this point, Harley Race still had the record with 7. Eventually, that would get changed to 8, and Flair was on his 6th title reign. So when Sting drops the belt to Flair at a house show the following January, Sting catapults Ric Flair into history, tying Harley Race for the record all time for most title reigns. So not only is Flair doing Sting the favor, but Sting is being set up to be a very important part of Flair's history in the legacy of the NWA. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but I thought it was a fantastic match. I thought it was the match of the night, that in the tag team match between the Midnight Express and the Southern Boys. And it was, to me, it was a very special match. It wasn't a typical Flair match because typically Flair didn't lose.
Well, and I think it was a classic because of the outcome, not necessarily the match itself. As the match is a wrestling match in a vacuum. It was the outcome, and it was the crowd reaction. And it's like you're saying, it was the context of the fact that, oh man, we just witnessed Ric Flair losing the title to Sting. We just witnessed Sting winning it for the first time, this babyface who's been climbing up the ranks. And so the heaviness of that is what mainly catapulted this into becoming a classic. And so I see what you're saying there. And that's where the breakdown is a lot of times when you talk about these guys like Meltzer and Wade Keller. I think the detriment of what they do is that they do analyze the match for the match, which is, it's legit, but you have to look at it in context, and you have to look at the storyline, you have to look at the history, you have to look at all the things you just mentioned, Rob, where, you know, there was more of a weight on this match because of the outcome, not just the moves that were done and the choreography of the match, but what it meant to the arc of wrestling history, you know?
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I don't think it's like even up for argument that this was like a very important moment in wrestling history. And yeah, well, you bring up an excellent point. I mean, like maybe Meltzer and Keller are like just trying to rate it right in the moment and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, the parts that matter, I mean, like, dude, you can't tell me, this is kind of off topic, but sort of not, but like that Ric Flair Shawn Michaels match where like Ric Flair's career supposedly ended, you know, and Shawn Michaels delivers the super kick at that WrestleMania. Like, dude, I lost it in that match. And it does not matter what else came after, what else came before. That match could have been garbage for all I remember. I remember the moment, and it mattered. And that was like sealing the deal. And I know Ric Flair went to TNA and he ate some crap with TNA and whatever. Maybe it was good or maybe it was bad. It doesn't matter. Like, that was like the wrap up for Ric Flair as far as I'm concerned, as far as his wrestling career is concerned, like in ring performance is concerned. And it was beautiful. And it's the way it should have gone down. And 100 years from now, I just hope that that's the story that carries on, and I'll do my part to just make sure that's the part that happens. But it's just like with the Sting and Ric Flair, it's fun to look back now and see the behind the scenes part of it. But it's also cool that I can only address this as a fan. It's the same reason, dude, that I keep bringing up WrestleMania 7. People can tell me all day long that pay-per-view was garbage, but I watched it 100 times as a kid, and I freaking love it. And we could talk one day about how BS it was, but it is what it is. It meant what it meant to me. And I think that this day, when that pinfall happened, when Sting pinned Ric Flair and got that 1, 2, 3, those arms in that crowd went up and people screamed. And even JYD and Rick Steiner and Scott Steiner and everybody, you can't tell me that was all BS. Those guys believed it. They were like, holy crap, this is something. And I believe it was.
And I know Flair's still got a lot of career ahead of him, but we have to agree that by this point in his career, he had more great matches behind him than ahead of him. This is one of his last great matches. He's got some great stuff in the WWF, man. The Royal Rumble, of course. His match with Bret Hart is a classic. He'll do some stuff in the WCW with Big Van Vader and with Barry Windham again and Randy Savage. But this is like one of the last really great landmark matches of his career. So for me, gosh, it's in that book of Flair classics, man. This is up there.
Well, I mean, even if you're talking about like a casual, like these guys are talking about, like a typical Flair match, whatever. But in the annals of history, like, well, I was just gonna say, in the annals of history, like they're gonna look at, like, you know, if you've got like 4 or 5 to lay out, yeah, sure, maybe he was building up like what a Flair match is, but like this will be the one. This will be the one that matters.
God forbid Flair wrestle a Flair match. That's his style. I mean, wrestlers have a style. They have a style that permeates all of their matches, and Flair has his style.
Dude, my favorite wrestler is Bret the Hitman Hart. I'll say it every day. And that dude, one of my favorite parts is I could tell you every freaking move that guy was going to nail. Like,
oh my gosh, who does Flair think he is? Ric Flair? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like saying, like, you know, we were talking about baseball earlier, but it's like, oh, the Yankees won the World Series, and it was a typical Yankees game. Like, you know, I mean,
at the end of 9 innings, they had more points and they had more runs. It's typical of the Yankees.
That's not an insult to say it was a typical Flair match. I mean, he's a legend for a reason, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
I wanted to hit a couple of points before we wrap this thing up. Completely, you know, this just brought me back in my notes that, like, when I was listening to JR's commentary, he just like established again. He's like, this is not just any passing of the torch. Like, he's like, Dusty Rhodes told us, like, it was like the day that Sting stepped in and like they gave him the spot against Flair, they were like, oh no, that's your boy right there. Like, that's the guy. And there was a lot of discussion back in the time that Luger should have been the guy. A lot of apparently there was like some discussion on like you backed the wrong horse. It should have been Luger. Stinson, do you remember any of that? Do you remember any of that discussion about?
I mean, Luger was in the title picture when Luger was ousted from the Horsemen. Even before that, you know, he was out. You know, he'd done some stuff in Florida and had a name that preceded him when he finally made it to the NWA. You know, there had been a lot of pressure. In fact, I think one of the falling out points ultimately when Flair left for the WWF was that Hurd had insisted that Flair drop the belt to Luger. And Flair said, I'm not doing it. You know, I promised it to Sting or Barry Windham. And that's who it's going to. So you can, and they, you know, they ended up stripping them. But Luger, you know, if you listen to some of like the shoot interviews that Flair does with RF video and high spots and all that, he's very gracious to Luger. He's not taking anything away from him. He felt like kind of like Elegante, but to a lesser extent, that he wasn't given the opportunity and booked properly and allowed the chance to develop right. Luger would go on to have a fine career, man, and win world championships and this and that. But in Flair's estimation, the heir apparent was either Sting or Barry Windham.
Yeah. Here, let's just go ahead and do this.
Let me say one more thing. Oh,
here we go. We should have done this from the get-go.
That's got real.
Well, you know, the reason that I didn't do earlier on is because I wasn't 100% sure that our boy JayCal watched Great American Bash recently, so I didn't want to include him on everything. But Rob, go ahead and say what you're going to say. And I had one last point what last point to make about Great American Bash, and then we've got to get to the after show. We've got a very specific question I want to tackle with JayCal, which is I invited him on. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
This is kind of this really is sort of and I know that Flair's going to win the belt one more time from Sting. He wins it in really odd fashion. It's at a very obscure house show in January of 1991. He's stripped of the belt after that. Not long after he does, I think he goes off and does a North Korea show and does some work out in the Orient. But this loss to Sting really ends the great era of Ric Flair in the NWA. Now the WCW, by the time Flair comes back, is separate from the NWA. They're not the same entity anymore. They're
well,
using,
Rob, I don't want to cut you off, but that was actually, just since you're saying that, I want to establish that was actually going to be my main last point, was that this feels like the last huge title change of the NWA for a period of time. For that era of the NWA. Like, I mean, even when Flair comes back, it'll be January of 91 that Flair wins it back, and shortly thereafter is the time that, like, there's the dispute, like WCW and NWA separate. Flair goes off to New Japan. JayCal, you may be able to tell us this. He loses a match to God help me,
Katsumi Fujinami, I believe, right?
That may be correct. But he loses it in such a way that, like, it's like an over-the-top rope kind of thing or something, and that's involved in the match. So WCW separates themselves from the decision, and they're like, well, that didn't change hands for us, but the NWA says that did change hands for us. And so that's when the official, like, that's sort of when the separation happens. But anyway, this Sting and Flair match is like the last, like, big fight change for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship in that era.
Right. One of the things that I kind of hope that with renewed interest, thanks to Nick Aldis and Tim Storm and the current iteration of the NWA, is I hope that it will backward project some attention on the very, very vibrant years that were the Adam Pearce years and the years right before that, because we have some very important title work going on and some important reigns that didn't get, unfortunately, because of television, that didn't get the attention that it deserves. So hopefully when we have this discussion in 10 years from now, we'll be looking back and saying, now, this wasn't the last great thing. But you're right. I think for the time when we're looking at, major promotions in the NWA about to sort of go into a period of wilderness obscurity, unfortunately, this is it, man. The NWA title goes into some weird version of like the international title or something like that. I can't quite remember how that was drawn out. I remember Flair coming back when he came back, and Barry Windham wins the belt, and Flair presents the belt. And he prior to that, he's saying, "Hey, we're here fighting tonight for the title that I never lost." Of course, by that point, it really wasn't the same anymore. But this is it, man. This is the end of this is not the end of the NWA era by any stretch, but this is the bookend of the Ric Flair era of the NWA.
Exactly. Welcome Turbo to the chat, John Blaine, Curtis Butler. Thank you everybody for joining up. I mean, the chat's just like building back up, and we appreciate you guys for joining us. We're going to end the podcast portion of this thing right now because we try to keep it to like a relevant amount of time that the podcast can appreciate it. But we're going to move on to the after dark section of this live show, because this conversation is far from over. We just welcomed in, if you're not seeing us on YouTube, we just brought in from the Alliance blog, JayCal is in the house, and we're about to hit some listener questions, some viewer questions, and we thought no better way to handle this than with one of the experts. So we've got Doc Robert Stinson, we've got Hey It's Will Daily, we got the Alliance blog's JayCal here, and we've got me, who is the least of all. But we're gonna be talking, and we're gonna be discussing some things, and I don't know. I don't know how else to end this except to say we got some teasers. We're gonna be talking about Kurt Angle. We're gonna be talking about the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship and its legacy. And you guys, if you want to hear that part of it, you got to start showing up live. You got to show up with us on the YouTube channel. We appreciate everybody who listens. That is our Stinson 4. Is that right? On all the social medias?
Oh, no. It's at R Stinson 4 on Twitter. On Instagram, you can find me at RD Stinson 4. On TikTok, well, you can't find me on TikTok yet because I'm not there. MySpace, you can find me as Tom. and on Facebook, Robert Stinson. But my content comes on this channel. This is the NWA podcast. And by the way,
YouTube.com/the NWA pod. This son of a gun. I swear. Every time.
Did I mess up something?
No, bro, you're fine. Will, where can people find you? I'm just trying to wrap up the part for the podcast.
What I was going to say, man, for all our viewers, if you tune into Piper's Notes this Friday, you're going to see the one and only JayCal as our special guest this Friday. So
snap.
Fantastic episode, and I think we actually cover Bad Street USA as our video of choice. So no better person to cover that than the one and only.
You mean the actual Freebirds, not the BS Freebirds you tried to pass off this time?
Bite your tongue right now, because I got JayCal in the house right now. He's going to get my back on this.
Will, where can people find you online?
At Hey It's Will with 1 L, pretty much everywhere except TikTok. I'm at Real Hey It's Will. And don't forget to check out our website. I don't know if Gary, you were going to say this, but we launched a new website, thenwapod.com. We got an online store. We're selling some NWA fan merch basically at cost. Rob's losing a lot of money on that, so buy it while you can at the prices. And we're doing a giveaway probably in the next few days. I think we're going to give away, if you're signed up for our mailing list, we're going to give away a free piece of NWA merch. If you've already bought some, then you can just pick up another one. If you got a shirt, you can get a mug now or something like that. But go check out the website. There's a few different ways to support us. Gary, I'll let you cover all that stuff. But yeah.
Well, no, I mean, Will did an excellent job there. I was, it's just, I'm sending out the tweet, just reminding people that we're about to hit the after show. Like, folks, if you're listening to this right now, we're trying to do a better job. And this is completely all on me. I take full blame. The podcast portion of things, I know it's been a lot. Like, it's like we've just been throwing up the live shows that can go like 3 hours. So we're trying to chop this thing down. So we want to cover things like a specific story, like the Great American Bash 90, which we just did. But if you want to stick around for the actual discussion, like the hardcore topics, like we're about to get into, like Kurt Angle and the NWA, what am I talking about? Where you're gonna have to jump in. You're gonna have to have this discussion with us when you're live on YouTube. And I know not everybody can make it. We do appreciate you on podcasts, but if you can, you gotta try to join us live on YouTube. We are doing giveaways. If you just like what we do, the NWApod.com helps you out. Like, you can do a monthly donation, and that's just because you're just feeling extra super generous with people like WWE Front Row. But you can also just try to buy us a beer. It just costs like $3 or something. Like, you can just do a one-time donation. It's just a nice thing you can do. But also, don't forget, like Will said, the hashtag NWA fan merch is at cost, and it is $5 flat rate shipping. So you can order 50 freaking items, and you can get that stuff shipped to you for $5. It's a terrible idea, but do it.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're regretting it a little bit. So cash in before we change our minds and smarten up.
Yeah, you can do it, because we're just trying to build this community. Hashtag NWA fam represents more than just us.
I was going to say, Ryan Romano lives in Australia. This joker is single-handedly bankrupting this is the NWA podcast, man. With the shipping.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Ryan, for bankrupting us. No, we're just trying to build a community, bro. That's what we're trying to do. I am at This Is Gary Horde, and we are at the NWA pod everywhere you can find us. Just try, if you're hearing us, try to come subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Get us in front of more people. Support people like JayCal and the Alliance blog. It's alliance-wrestling.com. Am I right, JayCal? That is correct. All right. And that is it for the podcast portion of this thing. Until next time, enjoy your gravy cake. All right. So now we're in the last part. At JayCal's here. He's drinking a Dos Equis. There it is. JayCal, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Absolutely. Very honored and privileged to be amongst some fine gentlemen with nice beards. And thanks for inviting me on.
What was it
Oh
you
my
said
God,
earlier,
yeah.
JayCal? You said the quad. You meant
The
gotta
Quad
hashtag
Beard
that.
Squad.
yeah.
Quad
like
Beard Squad. Well, here's the thing. I'm going to jump right in. You mentioned, I don't want to throw your business out there, but you mentioned your wife wasn't feeling well and stuff. So, like, I don't want to keep you from your family or anything like that. But we did get a question today, like, legitimately, that I thought, man, JayCal is going to be one of the top voices. And it was a well thought out, well written question. And as we all know, in what we do, this is also rare to come by. This is like a well drawn out thought, and I want to address it seriously. And I know that we can offer our opinions, but JayCal also lived it, and so I wanted to tackle it just for the after show. And it involves Kurt Angle, and it comes from a gentleman who on the Twitter device goes by El Mas Terrible. That is the name.
That's a solid name. That's a solid name.
No, I love it. Everything about this profile is money. And so that's why I want to take this very, very seriously. So if you guys are ready, I'm going to read you this whole thing. Feeling good? All right. So he says, hey guys, I was wondering if you could discuss something on your upcoming podcast. What are your thoughts on the NWA retroactively recognizing Kurt Angle as a heavyweight champion? I understand that the day that he won the belt was when the NWA had decided to break away from TNA. However, the belt he was holding at the end of that night was the 10 pounds of gold. The NWA recognizes Shane Douglas as a former champion, even though he disgraced the belt in the middle of the ring on the same night. Normally, I wouldn't even care, but when it comes to legitimacy, it makes perfect sense to me for Kurt to be associated with the NWA title. He's an Olympic champion, an established main eventer, and one of the best pro wrestlers of all time. Having him associated with the 10 pounds of gold would be not only beneficial to its legacy, whilst also putting another accolade on an already stellar career for Kurt Angle. Would you be happy to accept Kurt Angle as heavyweight champion of the NWA? That is the question we received from El Mas Terrible. And JayCal, you were living in it at this point, so I brought you here for a reason. So just fucking go at it. We're after hours.
We're after hours, so here we go. Okay, so the first things first, right? When we talk about the NWA and those wilderness era, you have to think about a couple of different things. The NWA was struggling to find its own identity.
Can I share you? Look at that.
Okay, cool.
Do you see
So yeah, exactly.
He's not impressed.
Look, I can pull up a picture of Hulk Hogan holding the 10 pounds of gold. Does that make him a world champion? I mean, and I get the sentiment, right? Because, hey, I was a high school wrestler, man. As soon as I found out who Kurt Angle was when he started in WWE, he quickly became one of my favorites. Even his time in TNA, I would say he was one of the bright spots. But I look at things in a very black and white way. I know there's shades of gray. Gary, we've had this discussion off air about a title swap that happened from Puerto Rico that the NWA acknowledged at one point, disavowed another point, and then acknowledged again. It's to me, we can't rewrite history. It is what it is. Now, I'll give you another example. You guys remember the AWA, right? American Wrestling Association. Well, it went out of business.
Sure.
They went out of business sometime around 1991. the WWE purchased up most of its assets in bankruptcy court. So the WWE officially owns AWA. That's why you'll see a lot of those old AWA matches were early on the WWE network. Around 1996, and it's funny because we were talking about this on my podcast today, there was a grifter, a shyster, a guy by the name of Dale Gagne. Well, his legal name was Dale Gagne with an R, but he changed it to Dale Gagne to kind of give himself some credence, to give himself a little bit of credibility. Dale went on to promote the AWA, the superstars of the AWA, using a lot of former AWA talent that was available. Guys like Marty Jannetty, guys like Paul Diamond. And he put on these events, and he used relatively big names for the time. Honky Tonk Man was on a lot of these cards. The Navajo Warrior, who's a big guy out here in the Southwest. And he put on these shows promoting themselves as the AWA, but it never was the AWA. At one point, they put the belt on Steve Corino, calling him the AWA World Champion. Even got one of those replica AWA titles. So for all intents and purposes, he had the belt that was tied to that legacy, but it wasn't the AWA. They took that belt to 0-1 in Japan, and 0-1 still uses that title belt as its world championship, claiming it is the AWA. Sorry, just got a notification. So it wasn't the same. It just wasn't. The comparison I'm making is Kurt Angle did not win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship because the NWA withdrew its agreement with TNA. That was actually coming into fruition. It wasn't like it happened overnight. It wasn't like it just said, hey, forget it. TNA, NWA, we're done. There was a period of time where every TNA pay-per-view that started off, Mike Digital, I think is his name on Twitter, just released the first 190 TNA pay-per-views. It used to be a strictly pay-per-view business. And in those early pay-per-views, you hear them acknowledge the NWA. They acknowledge the legacy of the NWA. They acknowledge upcoming events for the NWA. But by the time Kurt Angle won that match, there were no ties to the NWA. They even stopped calling it the NWA World Championship. They called it the TNA Heavyweight title. It was no longer the 10 pounds of gold. It was the TNA Championship. Go back and watch the videos, guys. I'm not making this up. It became increasingly difficult to book the NWA World Champion by the promotion that was the NWA. David Marquez was one of the few guys that was able to get a title match with Jeff Jarrett and Christian Cage, or Christian Cage and Jay Lethal. But it was increasingly difficult, and a company, the territory days, there was a fixed price for the world's heavyweight champion. The champion sometimes took less to work NWA matches because the belt kind of gave some more credibility. So your bookings outside of the NWA would usually make up for what you were taking a hit on in working with the NWA versus working outside of the NWA. So it was increasingly difficult to get the world's heavyweight champion on these shows. TNA is disavowing its connection to the NWA. There were no special pricing to get Sting to come wrestle at your NWA event. None of the promoters could afford the champions that were being approved by TNA. Again, they were also being approved without direct correlation with the NWA board of directors. Now, I know all this sounds crazy because we're talking about two different eras. Billy Corgan's NWA, the buck stops with Billy Corgan. He's the guy. But, 15 years ago, there was a board of directors who they made the decision who won the title. There were 5 titles that were recognized by the board of directors, and you had to have permission from those board of directors to change the titles. You couldn't just willy-nilly have a title change on your card unless it was approved by the board of directors. And if you did, you would ultimately get blackballed by the NWA. The title would never, they would find a reason not to recognize that. It didn't happen very often. I mean, you've heard the stories about Tim Storm being offered to drop the, and notice how it says the World Heavyweight Championship, but not the NWA. Oh, well, maybe you caught me eating crow there a little bit. listen to the announcers. I know you can't do it right now, but they do not call that the NWA World
I don't
Title.
know if you could hear it.
I don't hear it. Are they
yeah.
referring to?
Sorry, I'm not trying to distract you, JayCal. I thought it would be interesting to like throw that up there.
Did the live audience see that as well?
Yeah.
So-
They should have seen it. Yeah.
So okay, I'm eating a little crow here, but on the TV show they did not. I watched Impact. I don't know if you guys did at the time. They constantly referred to it as, they constantly referred to it as the TNA Heavyweight Championship. And again, there was a series of reasons why they ended that relationship. If you guys go listen to my interview with David Marquez, who he wasn't the president of the NWA, he wasn't the top dog of the NWA, but he's one of the top promoters of the NWA at the time. He was at some of those meetings with the TNA management and the NWA board of directors because he was a part of both. And there just wasn't that level of respect. And it just was no longer beneficial for the NWA. And rumors have it that TNA had already started getting their title belt designed, a TNA championship, because there was a lot of hostility dealing with the NWA for them as well. The NWA didn't like this agreement at this point. It was becoming a waning deal for both parties. So when the NWA said, we're going to pull it, TNA didn't fight it, but they needed to use the belt that night. If their belt would have been ready, would that have changed things for anyone else? If it wasn't the 10 pounds of gold, if it was just a world's heavyweight championship, would that have changed anything?
Right. And JayCal, if I'm not mistaken, it was the NWA's decision ultimately to sever that relationship. So it's not like TNA had their money deal and they can no longer use the NWA. The NWA made the call on this.
I think, I don't have this written down anywhere. No one specifically said it, but I think the NWA quit before they could get fired, if that makes sense. I think the plan was that TNA was going to stop using it because they were paying for a licensing. They weren't honoring the deals that they had with the NWA, and it just wasn't making sense. Why are you paying to use the NWA letters when you're not promoting yourself as an NWA member? You're not promoting the other NWA champions, the tag titles, the world title. That was it. No North American, no national, no world junior heavyweight, no women's champion. None of that was being defended. None of that was even being talked about on Impact.
Right.
Let me throw in just for what it's worth, if I could, like WhatCulture.com has a whole thing about this. So I was just looking at this particular change. They were talking about like high profile wrestlers with forgotten NWA championship runs is this article for anybody who cares. But the section on this says, I'm just going to read it here. By the time Kurt Angle arrived in TNA in 2006, the NWA was on its way out, and the relationship between the two parties would fall apart just 8 months after his arrival, but not before Angle got his hands on NWA Gold. Factually, Kurt Angle's time with the NWA Championship lasted less than a week. Technically, the victory is far from that simple. On the day of TNA Sacrifice in 2007, the NWA officially withdrew from their association with TNA. As such, the NWA stripped all TNA talent of their NWA championships, making Christian Cage's NWA title defense that night effectively null and void. Nevertheless, the belt itself was still in possession of the TNA and Captain Charisma, and he defended the NWA title as planned. Angle defeated Cage and Sting in a three-way main event to walk away with the NWA Gold in hand, yet, despite leaving with the NWA Championship, the win itself is not currently recognized by the NWA. The NWA has a history of retroactively validating title wins, so whether or not this decision stands remains to be seen. With an ironclad pedigree as one of the greatest amateur wrestlers in U.S. history, Kurt Angle is the ultimate blueprint for what an NWA champion should be. If the NWA were to validate Angle's win, adding an Olympic gold medalist to their list of official champions would benefit NWA most of all. But that's what they said about this. So it's a super weird situation.
And think about it this way. I mean, what does it really add to the NWA? Because how many times did Kurt Angle defend that title belt? How many times did he have a match that he defended the NWA? him winning it, what does it mean? You know what I mean? Like Adam Pearce won the title in Bayman, Puerto Rico, defeating Brent Albright after the Reclaiming the Glory tournament, and went on to hold the title 5 times and had over, I think, I want to say, maybe about 700 days as champion. Stinson could probably knows the answer to that.
That's right.
But he defended that title all across the United States. He was showcased in Hollywood. He was showcased in West Virginia. He was showcased on Canadian pay-per-view. He was wrestling in the United Kingdom. He was wrestling in Australia, wrestling in Germany. That meant something. That carried weight. Kurt Angle never even had an opportunity to defend the title. So, let's say we could retroly put that back on Kurt Angle. What does it accomplish for the NWA? To say that he won the belt? Well, what does that do? How much value do you get from rewriting history?
Exactly, anything, and that's what it would be. You can't, because you can't retroactively put the belt back on, because the belt is just a symbol of the title. It's like we see people, it's a common motif where someone might come and steal the belt, and that doesn't make him the champion. Or Ric Flair going into WWF with big gold doesn't make that now the NWA/WCW belt is being defended. It's just a symbol of the title. And by the time Kurt gets his hands on the belt, the NWA is not a part of the organization. So there is no retroactive recognition, because historically it doesn't exist. You can't have a championship of an organization that doesn't sanction the event in the first place. So,
and again, that's where I think this becomes a problem. Say hi.
Hi.
And that's where this becomes a problem.
Is that Piper?
No, this one's Claire. This is my
hey, Claire.
My awesome Claire Bear. So this becomes she loves it. She's never met a camera she didn't love.
I'm so jealous of you with your cool kids.
And she wants to come and hang out. But see,
hanging out, man.
Yeah. You like this?
We're just.
Oh.
Wait, what?
Sorry.
Okay.
What did you do, Dad?
You messed it up again. But this is another example of what I was trying to get with the AWA. I don't think I got there. Was a couple of times Dale Gagner reversed the decision that when Hogan challenged Nick Bockwinkel for the World's Heavyweight Championship, and famously lost the title twice with dusty finishes where the crowd thought Hogan won, but later referee's decision in the back put the title back on Bockwinkel. Gagner went back and did that to try to gain credibility, to try to gravy train off of Hogan's name. But to what extent did that do?
Say gravy cake.
That's what I thought. Did you say just
but at the end of the day, it doesn't add any value to say that this guy held your title, because you didn't get to profit off of his name. It might help Kurt Angle, but I mean, honestly, let's call a spade a spade. Put your hands down. Let's call a spade a spade. The NWA World Title didn't have the cachet that it has today. It was basically disregarded by TNA, and it wasn't the WWE Heavyweight Championship. It wasn't on top billing. So, to answer the question, short and sweet, I don't think that recognizing Kurt Angle benefits anybody, and I don't think that. Can you put your hand down? It doesn't really add value to anybody. Kurt Angle, Impact, the NWA, and the worst thing of all is that vacancy in between Kurt Angle Christian being stripped of the title and Scrap Iron Adam Pearce winning the belt. That discrepancy, that vacancy, hurt everybody involved, because if Kurt Angle would have done the job to Adam Pearce, then that's a different story. But that wasn't the case.
No, not at
I agree.
all.
She's great. She's a great hype person. We need to have her on more, just like affirm our views more. Yep.
Not at all.
A channel.
That's right.
I got a channel called Parent Eye.
All
My
right.
sister is Parent.
We're not plugging your YouTube channel right now.
Oh, well, it sounds like we are.
you got a
Yeah, I
YouTube?
guess so.
Yeah.
Hey, plug away.
Yeah, ClaraCal has a YouTube channel.
Yeah, the kids, we gave them you know, they were watching that kid Ryan open up all his toys and playing with them, and they thought, well, we could do this. And well, sorry, I'm not Ryan's dad. I'm not that talented. We're working on it, but we're not there yet.
I don't know, Dad. It sounds like you don't know how to be a hype man, but she's gonna do it for you.
Listen, if any of my kids wanted to start a channel and make some of that money that kid does, I'd be all for it. Let's do it.
Oh, I'm not against it. I'm just saying it's not as easy as it looks.
I wanted to point out that JayCal's wearing the 4 Horsemen shirt with the big gold, which is a belt that he hates. He hates that belt.
This was a gift, and it's not that I hate the belt. Don't get me wrong. I don't hate the belt. I just really love that Sweet Charlotte. This was a gift, and my buddy knew that I'm a fan of the NWA. And if you look at this thing, it's got one of my favorite belts right here. The tag title. Yeah.
Haven't you been documented referring to that as the big gold glob, though?
Not glob, just the big gold belt. The big gold belt.
Man, I think Friday they're going to hear you call it the big gold glob.
Well, I might have been drinking that morning.
I'm just giving you a hard time, man.
Well,
it's not the same as 10 pounds, man. It's not the same, but yeah, I'm with you. I don't hate it, but I don't particularly love it.
I mean, look, it served its purpose, but I would have much rather seen like the Muda or Chono or Barry Windham carrying that 10 pounds of gold. I really felt like in those days in New Japan when the NWA title was relevant in Japan, where I mean it wasn't really being defended in the United States, that connection, that correlation to Flair and Race and Rhodes and the Von Erichs and a Von Erich and Briscoe. I mean, I think that would have had so much more magnitude for New Japan. But
sure,
guys, I hate to do this to you. I gotta go.
Oh man, that's cool.
All good.
Hey, one point about that, JayCal, I was going to say, I think that people just in their own time don't understand, they don't appreciate it. You know, I would say that we probably revere the 10 pounds of gold now more than we ever have in the NWA history. You know, people were kind of, they were enamored by Big Gold when it came out. It was this big, massive, like fantastic piece of work, and people were kind of happy to be rid of the beat up old trophy, you know. But now we revere it. I don't think we'll ever go away from 10 pounds ever again.
I don't think so. Well, I know you wanted to say something, brother, before I go.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I mean, in terms of Kurt Angle, at this point, the only, I guess, motivation to do it would be for novelty, just for name recognition. I mean, the NWA is an organization that values history and tradition. He doesn't have any history or tradition with the NWA as a promotion. So it just doesn't seem like it would make any sense to do it just because of name recognition. That's where I stand on it.
Yeah. It's so like, see, this is where, like, yes, if Kurt Angle was able to keep that title and, you know, he went on to defend it against Abyss and Rhino and Raven and Christian and Jeff Jarrett and AJ Styles. I mean, then it's like, okay, well, how do we disavow that happened? We saw it on TV. And I know possession's 9/10 the law, right? I get it. But once the NWA said, hey, we don't sanction that title match anymore, we don't sanction that championship in Impact, it's no longer an NWA title. They stripped the sanction, they stripped the name, they stripped that title. Do you know where that belt is now? Do you know who owns that belt today?
Yeah,
Triple H,
right?
Triple H owns Ric Flair's belt. The Sheik owns a different belt.
Yeah, that's what I said. The Sheik,
and he doesn't own it. He stole it.
He stole it.
Scrap Iron Adam Pearce had that worked into his deal, that when he left the company, they would replace that belt and give it to. He would take the Impact version of that title. So, I mean, it's not on Kurt Angle's kitchen. It's not on Dixie Carter's shelf. It's in Adam Pearce's house. So,
well, now you're just talking about. Listen, this is what I'll do for you, JayCal. I will give you. Kurt Angle is not a legitimate NWA World Heavyweight Champion. If you will give me Jack Veneno is a legitimate NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
I can't do it. I can't. I can't do it because the reason is that wasn't the booking plan. That wasn't what they were supposed to do. That
Doesn't
wasn't
matter. It's what happened. It's what
The
happened.
The committee sanctioned title changes in those days.
right. And
Just
that
be an
that wasn't
individual guy and say, "Hey, I'm going to do the job," and it was a matter of necessity. But it's like, today, since the buck starts
It's unplanned. Ric Flair just said, "Fuck it, I'm out." Like,
because he thought he was going to lose his life. He thought he was going to lose his life.
he
Doesn't
didn't wanna
matter.
he didn't want to be Brody number 2, man. He didn't want that to happen.
He's like, I'm out. I'm out. This guy wins. He forfeited. He forfeited that title.
The booking committee who did not recognize the change, though, and that's the
thing.
And
that
now that dude has a statue built towards him in the Dominican Republic. Like,
there's a Confederate statue in downtown Dalton saying, "I represented an independent sovereign country," and that is not true.
Yeah, but they ain't won shit ever.
They won the Battle of Chickamauga that trophy commemorates. But
okay,
I'm just saying, nobody turned it over to them saying like, "Oh, you get this one." No, I'm just saying, like, Jack, at least, like, the champ was like, "You take it. I don't want it."
okay, so let's do this by comparison, because when Giant Baba won the title in Japan, that brother paid for that. He paid to be champion for a day or two. He paid big money to the NWA board of directors, to the NWA, to Harley Race. People got paid, and that was part of the plan. So that's why he gets to keep that recognition. You ever hear that Harley Race about the titles that changed hand in Auckland, New Zealand, with Rich Strickland? No, you don't hear about that, because those titles weren't officially recognized by the NWA, because that wasn't part of the plan. That was Harley going into business for Harley. It wasn't part of the NWA. That's why those happened. With pro wrestling, just like any other business, man, you gotta pay to play. And what happened in Puerto Rico, I mean,
even in prize fighting and boxing, man, that's why we have these splinter promotions, WBF, IBO, IB, because different promoters refuse to recognize title changes or championships, and so they found their own. And sometimes they're unified, and sometimes they're not. But the NWA is a spectator prize fighting entity, and it chooses to recognize the champions that it's determined to recognize, and it just.
But what it could do is take all of those and just recognize it as part of its history and recognize those title changes, and it would still end up in the exact same place it's at right now.
It could, Gary. It could, but it hasn't.
Let's now. Okay, so let's do fantasy booking 101 over here, because of the Paul Songus Arena in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I think that's where it is, where not only Impact would run their TV tapings and live events in that area, but so did the NWA, so did David Marquez. And he booked Jay Lethal to take on Christian Cage for the 10 pounds of gold, that World's Heavyweight Championship match. And let's just say Dave stumbled across an extra $10,000, maybe an extra $1 million. I don't know what it would cost. And he says, "Hey, Christian, tonight you're going to lay down for Lethal, and we're going to put the belt on Lethal." They would have gotten a lot of hot water with Impact. That would have caused a lot of trouble. In fact, there's a reason why Jeff Jarrett stopped working for Marquez, because he didn't like dealing with him. He didn't like dealing with the NWA. So if they would have switched the hands.
Did that happen, though?
No, it's hypothetical.
Well, I'm saying if it did, I'd be over here arguing that Jay Lethal is a former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion.
I would say it wasn't part of the plans.
I don't care what the plans are. What I'm saying is, what happened?
I like Drunk
What
Gary.
happened?
This is the first time I've dealt with Drunk Gary.
Gary, the NWA could recognize.
Listen to me. There's an Atlanta, Georgia Airbnb balcony that's going to be real fucked up, and 4 wives that are going to be like, "Oh God, shut the fuck up." there's
I'm already catching feelings, Gary.
That's coming. That's
Take
coming.
it easy. I'm already catching feelings. Take it easy. Yeah, I'm on the pert here. I know that's what's gonna happen.
No. This is good, man. I just like talking to people that actually give a shit about this as a company and as a brand and like what it means. And I'm already cursing too much. And obviously, yes, you're right. I've had my coffee.
And Piper,
My hashtag
go in the other
NWA fam coffee.
Go in the other room. We got Whiskey Gary. Go in the other room. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
I'll say this only on the after dark version of the show. I'm just happy to talk to people that actually like care about the stuff we're talking about and not just about themselves. So that's a plus for me. So, I'm in.
And I have to take exception to something you guys said while broadcasting the live show. And you put me in the same category as a lot of great wrestling journalists. Now, I will always say that when it comes to the NWA, I'm probably more passionate than most of the reporters of my time. But I'm not in that category, guys. I'm just a very passionate person who saw an opportunity to share my passion with people who were like-minded, just like what you guys are doing right now.
That's all any of us are, dude. That's the thing. That's what we're doing. And people out there right now, like people that are in this chat room right now, people that are watching or watching later or whatever, that's all any of us are. There are people that want to have this conversation, and some people don't want to put themselves on camera. Some people don't want to speak publicly or whatever. None of that matters. It's like we're out here supplying a platform for everybody to speak. And that's what this is. That's what you do. That's everything. It's like we've got a place, like talk about what you care about as far as wrestling goes. What do you care about?
You don't have to be humble, and we're not. This isn't you being braggadocious or anything, but the fact of the matter remains, the NWA is the most important wrestling entity in the world, and there's no more person, not Hornbaker, not Brian Solomon, not Meltzer, not anybody that knows more about the NWA than you do. We defer to you. You're the freaking godfather of the NWA. Yes, that's true. It's not, whatever. It's true. It's not for you to say. And
the thing is like let's just all like go down on JayCal right now. It says hopefully Piper's not No, what it is that we acknowledge that you have this knowledge, especially of this time period where a lot of people wrote off the very thing that we're all here to celebrate. And none of us had the platform. None of us had the exposure. None of us had, like, we're making the effort to like produce something. For whatever reason, it doesn't mean any. It's not like knocking anybody. Like Stinson's obviously been a fan of the NWA for forever, but he watched like Adam and I talking on YouTube, and it took like his daughter Piper like saying like, "Hey, you could like chat with them," and like blah blah blah, before he finally started like realize, oh, this is the thing we all could do.
Right.
It just is what it is. You did it. You were there. You were keeping track of it, and you don't get a choice. I talked to Bruce Mitchell. Like he and I communicate a pretty good bit, and he's the senior editor for the Pro Wrestling Torch or whatever. I call him a historian. He's like, I didn't even mean to be a historian. It's just that I've just been here. I've just been here this whole time talking about it, and I've been watching it, and I've been writing about it. So like I'm just here, and I'm like, well, that's what counts. You were there. Like you just did it, and that's what you did, dude. So don't like, don't brush it away. You did it. You're here. You're now, and you're finally in a situation where there's some other nerdy a-holes that like value that knowledge, and it finally happened, and we're here.
First of all, don't call my friend a-holes. Second of all, this is like the Mutual Admiration Society. I hope you guys understand. When I did that podcast, expecting all of us to rise up, this isn't what I was expecting, but I certainly appreciate it. I wasn't hoping, I've always wanted this community. Sir Absurd on Twitter said that today. You finally got your community, and it's like this was the game plan. 14 years ago. When I started writing for SoCal Uncensored, there wasn't a big NWA contingent there. SoCal still kind of looks at the NWA as a black eye, and I never understood that. And Dave Marquez gets a bad rap for whatever reason out in SoCal, but he's celebrated almost everywhere else. It just doesn't make any sense. So to be at this level now, to have guys like you, and we're all preaching the same thing, that NWA, I really hope Billy and Aldis and the folks that are running the NWA and will continue to run the NWA appreciate what they have in you guys, because this doesn't go. I mean, we don't add to the show, we don't add to the wrestling, but we certainly add to the community. And I really feel like you guys, and I'll give myself credit, me too, we definitely bring something extra to the table. And it's this community that's watching this video. You guys are on the East Coast. I'm looking at that. It's like 12:30 where you guys are. It's 9:30 over here, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting tired. You guys, it's 12:30, and you guys are still talking wrestling. And you've got people in the live chat room right now who are hanging on to this, which boggles my mind. And I think it's so cool that this community is coming together. And I know we don't talk about Adam Rotella a lot on this show, but I give him a lot of credit for getting that ball rolling. But I really think that what you guys are doing, and what I'm doing too, I really think is adding value to what the NWA has. And when they come back and they put a show on at 6:00 Eastern, I mean, we're keeping that spot warm for them. We're keeping an audience here for them. And I really think there's something to be said about that. So I appreciate you guys. Nothing but love. And unless there's something else, man, I'll bid you all adieu.
Jacob, man.
Well
And
said.
trust me, that sentiment has been expressed. It's like that we're here. We're the ones keep flame alive. And I think they know. I think they know. And even if they had second thought what happens from here, I think they have to see this kind of stuff, and they know.
And they're coming back. I have it on authority. They're coming back. I can't reveal everything, but they're coming back.
Same, brother. They're coming back.
Gentlemen, I don't know exactly how to exit this thing, so I'm gonna push some buttons. If you want to kick me out instead, so it doesn't look stupid with my hands all up in the screen.
We always try to beat each other. We always try to see who can get out first.
It's usually me.
It's usually Will. Will is usually the first out.
I'm out in the backyard tonight, so I'm not in the actual studio. So I'm on my phone.
Killing you, JayCal. I'm gonna do it for you. I'm just gonna put you out like old Yeller.
Bye, buddy.
Good night, gentlemen.
Oh, I thought I stopped it, but I don't know. I just turned his camera off. I don't think can I kick the guy?
I don't know.
I don't know. I thought that meant like
He's
I
connecting to audio right now.
Oh, no. He's gone. Okay.
All right, he's gone. He figured it out. I don't know.
All right.
Oh my god. No, WWE Front Row. We got to get WWE Front Row on here sometime.
Oh yeah, man.
To like hang out with us, because that guy's great too. He's like always chilling with us and everything. We're gonna wrap this thing up, guys. Let's kill this thing. I'm on call for work, so chances are I was up at 4:00 this morning. So I'm going off very little sleep and very much tequila.
Oh, tequila Gary. Oh, so tequila Gary.
What are you looking at? What is like poltergeist swarming around your head right now? Like,
Terry Mana. It's the rocks. It's the rocks brand.
Tequila.
Hey, we're gonna end this live chat. It's at the NWA Pod. We love you guys. WWE Front Row. You are the man. Thank you so much for hanging out. Anybody else watching? We love you. And hit us up on the website, and we'll see you again after a while. Until then, enjoy your gravy cake. No, I don't want to end the whole thing. I just want to stop the live stream. There it is. This will. Love you, WWE Front